Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Let's hop in. Yeah, I was just watching a YouTube video talking about how you're trying to, as a content creator, engage people and viewers in the first few seconds. I don't know what a lot of content creators, including myself, uh, really can do more. It really seems like it's just kind of an impossible ask unless you just have a pre-recorded intro that can just half a second show something flashy to catch an attention, half another second to show something. I guess that would be the next step, is just make some kind of insane intro that is super ADHD to do as many firework like flashes of cutscenes or things to expect in the video based on things that have been on the channel in the past. It really would smack in the face of my channel being calm, certainly, as far as like not going for that, hey, what's up guys, let's smash that like button type stuff. But yeah, if there were any suggestions, I guess I would take that. The YouTube is really demonetizing a lot of old videos enough that people are complaining for, I think, mostly cussing that was allowed before. Where basically just every January, the advertisers are going to try to negotiate and push for something tighter and more strict, or YouTube themselves is going to use advertisers pushing for something in kind of, I want to say false flag, but the collusion, I guess, would be the better move, where YouTube themselves and advertisers are colluding together to demonetize smaller channels and have a more elite top tier of big channels. Almost certainly PewDiePie isn't going to have any of his videos demonetized for any cussing or that he had done in the past that were monetized before. Although, maybe a few. And right now, I think a lot of people complaining about their videos getting demonetized because they are cussing is kind of ridiculous. Now, there is also channels getting demonetized because they were like just what YouTube is calling enabling dishonest behavior, which is like sneaking into stores and staying in there after it's locked up, or pretending to be employees of the store. Just straight up things that are technically illegal but not illegal enough that would have ended up with people calling for them to be arrested or for them to get arrested. And those kinds of, oh, it's just a prank bro channels should be demonetized. It'll make for a better YouTube in the long run, because you cannot really compete on a fair play field when you have people out there who are just willing to do straight up illegal or incredibly dangerous activities. And so I would have said that most of those channels were cheating and got lucky to be monetized in the first place. But yeah, as far as the cussing thing goes, it's really just a lesson that people should have already learned. There's basically the concept of fighting words, and cussing has always been there. Well before TV, radio, any of that. People 3-4 generations knew even then you don't cuss because somebody's going to take offense to it. That's always been the case. There's never been a time in which a regular word turned into a cuss word at any alarming rate. So it's not a case like the word cat all of a sudden gets your channel demonetized. People should have known from the beginning not to cuss. It's a great lesson for everybody out there, particularly young people. Just don't get in the habit of cussing. Cussing always makes you stupid. Doesn't matter if it makes you sound stupid. It may make you sound cool to your edgelord teenage friends, 12-year-old friends, certainly. Like, that's back when I heard the vast amount of cussing, and when I did the vast amount of cussing is when I was an edgelord, like, tween-age child. It's it's not it's not intelligent by any means. Like, people cuss because they can't think of any other words. They can't think of any other words because they're not using their vocabulary that they have built up, or they just don't have a vocabulary to build up. Uh, it is much smoother to insult people without cussing, and much more effective to insult people without cussing. In every case, when you get into a job thing, you can't just cuss at somebody who's an employee or a co-worker. That can easily get you fired, even though you're a whole group of people. It's just, there's never a point in your life at which cussing is going to benefit you, and YouTubers have had it far too easy to do that. And certainly this is something also mentioned to gamers too. If you're playing Modern Warfare and you're just out there cussing over live chat over and over again, stop it. Like, Modern Warfare has made it pretty obvious you're going to get banned for doing that eventually, and it just doesn't work well, particularly in the case of like doing it in live chat. You just don't know who's recording and who you're talking to at all, so you don't know if you're cussing to a like 5-year-old who shouldn't be playing Modern Warfare but is, or you don't know if you're cussing to an adult that may have some actual influence in your life, like your principal or something, if you're still in school, or your dean if you're in college, or your boss if you're working. There's just no benefit for it. Use better words, or don't use words at all. I'd even go as far as to say, as far as the whole cussing thing, the fact that like people are cussing along with songs, don't do that either. Don't get those words into your vocabulary. Like, even the soft A N word, don't get in the habit of that, regardless of what race you are. It doesn't work. You can't use the soft A in a lot of situations, and the one situation that it is socially allowed to be used is when you're hanging with a bunch of other people who sound like gangsters or gang bangers or unintellectual people. It just doesn't ever work to do that. It gets down to almost a code switching thing too, and I don't particularly think that code switching is a great idea, but you definitely shouldn't be, again, regardless of your own race, code switching to using cuss words. Rappers have glorified cussing way too much, and songwriters have glorified it way too much, and they are kind of not people to be emulated in many different ways. I'm going on too much of a rant here, and so yeah, I'm not particularly concerned about the cussing. I think a lot of YouTubers are blowing out of the water. A lot of old videos getting demonetized doesn't mean much for 99.99999% of all content creators, because if you're not getting views in the first 24 hours, you're not getting views at all. So the bee lasagna from PewDiePie, for instance, is probably a video that was never monetized in the first place, but if it was monetized before and it's not monetized now, I don't know if he was really making a significant amount of his income off of that music video. Sure, there maybe should be some pushback towards this censorship. We can certainly go into the censorship rant, that there is a soft censorship happening here as far as free speech, but also we also have to admit YouTube is never going to be a free speech platform, because any real free speech platform is going to have to either be constricted by a governmental authority to ensure free speech, or it's going to have to be an open source platform that is not controlled by any single individual, which, yeah, that's not YouTube. Let's see, apparently the prices The number and price of gems for in-game sales will be adjusted after the following maintenance price. So are they going up or are they going down? The purchase price displayed on the confirmed purchase screen right beside proceed payment. So they're not telling you whether they're raising the price or lowering the prices. Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links has a 6th anniversary, which is a different Yu-Gi-Oh! Game. So they're telling you go log into Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links. It makes no sense at all that Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links is not in some way merged into Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. It really should just be like one executable. It would be kind of crazy if the visual animations, or at least the cards and the descriptions, weren't all in the same file format anyways. So why not just have a button here that says Master Duel and then Duel Links. Duel Links plays very differently, and it's more mobile phone centric than Master Duel is, although Master Duel is also mobile phone centric first. And Duel Links has actual story that is built around the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, where there's just none of that in Master Duel. So yeah, there's some stuff here. I need to actually talk. As for the accountability section today, then I've been fairly progressive. I've made a lot of progress and didn't sit around and watch a ton of YouTube or Netflix. Now I'm still watching a ton of YouTube, but I didn't watch a ton of Netflix on top of that. So one of the things I wanted to show off is here's the Steam library, and I had this installed locally dynamic category. You have favorites, which is a special category. Then I made this installed locally category to have all the games that are just installed. Those are the things that I am quickest to think about playing. And then I have a playing category, which is a bad description. Those are things that are second tier. I want to play these fairly quickly. And then after that, there's series done, which means I already covered it. Series done, 100% achievements. Maybe I'd come back and play it to get to get 100% of the achievements. I have a blacklist here with exactly one game in it, Depression Quest, which I just don't see a reason I'd ever play that game, even though it's in my library. I have some that are broken and I'm waiting for a Scum VM update. And then I have some special categories for like Sonic games and Star Wars games and Uplink games. And then before this, I had these like manually made categories. These are the ones like Disney here that don't have the lightning bolt next to them. I had a whole bunch of these for like action, adventure, casual that I used a third-party application to make, and it was static. Well, in the meantime of a couple of years in which I had done that, they have added now the dynamic ability to just have that automatically update. Now, that comes out with a slightly different result in that things in the action category can also be in the adventure category, because they're picking the first couple of tags that are used in the game. So these categories will be longer lists instead of it being in one list only. And so, but I really recommend and think this really should just be the default way to do this. So if you were going to add this to a new collection, you right click, add to new collection. then you give it a name. We'll just call it Z this time. And then you click create dynamic collection. Now when you do that, it stupidly adds this first game to it manually. So you can add any game and you can have that in your collection or not in your collection by clicking X. Alright. So we're doing a bit of a tutorial here. Generally, there is this weird subcategory here where you have action, adventure, casual, indie, massive multiplayer, the MMO, racing, RPG, simulation, sports, and strategy. These are the only genres that Steam seems to have as a first tier tag, which I guess there's a chance that when Steam first was launched, the 1.0 version of Steam, these were all created and programmed one way. And it does seem to me like they are trying to stick to that, which doesn't make the most amount of sense because there are obviously more categories than that out there. Let's see. It's really hard to talk while also playing Flow Laundries. I should have switched back to Tri Brigade. I can't really do anything, so gotta just do this and then summon this and then activate this and then yeah, I think we want this one. Summon this, say yes to this, take this out, take this out. Return that to the deck, I guess. Activate this effect. Really shouldn't have started the game at all if I was going to go this direction. Okay. Then I guess we'll just banish this to then normal summon this to maybe bring this back. Yeah, that's as good as we can get. And the hope here would be that they would just not be able to do anything in the next turn and we would win. Alright, so sorry for the break there. So yeah, you could filter by a lot of different things. Ready to play maybe is more confusing. If you just wanted to install locally, which I'd recommend that, you just click that there. And then it immediately would fill in that list. You also, I would recommend, should have, even if you don't own a Steam Deck, verified and playable, which that gives me, for my account, like 775 games that are verified and playable on the Steam Deck. Whereas if you wanted, say, verified, playable, and untested, that would go up to 1,300 games. I don't know what really verified even means there, though verified itself seems to only go up to 296. So I assume verified is probably, we know that there's little to no bugs for playing any of these games on the Steam Deck. So take your pick there as far as that. And you can have multiple tags here as far as like VR and verified on Steam Deck to even get smaller, more precise labels. I wouldn't care about any of the features such as workshop achievements, remote play together maybe is a feature that you would care for. I want to summon this one. Can I special summon something here? Let's activate this first. Summon this. Banish this, I guess. Summon this. Let's see if I normal summon this here. Take this. Sacrifice that one. Get rid of that one. Think I win at that point. Unless he can just activate one card out of his hand. So I guess this does show that Flowandries does work. So I should play it. But I shouldn't have started the game here as I was trying to talk. And I'm certainly just doing this all off the cuff. And if I was really going to try and make a tutorial, I should have done that better. So anyways, like, for each one of these you would name it like action, and then you would do that. You can click this to hide this top selection bar. You can also click snapshot to save its current state. So if you've got a whole bunch of filters and you've got exactly like you want it, then you make a snapshot of it. You turn it from a dynamic collection to a static collection, which might be more useful for most people, particularly if you're looking for specific things. There are, however, a lot of extra tags. If I just hit A, you can see that just hitting the letter A brings up more tags than what you have here. And noticeably, there's like no age rating here, so you can do things like family friendly, which is something to think about. But particularly in the case of family friendly, you have to question whether some of these aren't actually joke tags. Like Disney games, certainly I can see it being family friendly. Costume Quest, family friendly. But I definitely have seen adult games that have put in the family friendly, and then it was just straight up like nudity porn games in that category. Pretty Girls Mahjong Solitaire is a good on the border example where it really is not family friendly as a game, because you do have these anime girls in kind of lewd outfits and you're playing Mahjong, which is a game that would only be family friendly if you were in a country that grew up with families playing Mahjong. Let's see. Voices from the Sea, I have no idea. The vast majority of these games, though, do seem close enough to being on family friendly that it's not like a totally broken tag. Or if you, for instance, wanted fantasy games, you can make that tag too. And if you wanted adult games, which is noticeably the thing that's missing here the most, you would have to type in something like adult and then maybe hentai, or nudity. Yeah, nudity would be a tag you would want to add. You'd have to add 2 or 3 tags like that um, to have a section that here's the adult games in particular, just to be the counter of family friendly. I don't think that there's a way here to do a not. So if I was to say give me all the games that don't have family friendly in it, that would be far too long of a list. Um, but yeah, obviously I do have a triple X category here, dynamic collection. Um, and then the thing to show off too is if you want to get rid of a collection, you have to come over here and remove the collection. What you can't do is select every game and remove it from that collection, because it will still keep in this database that the collection exists. And then you could do it that way, but then when you go to add to, that would be back. So you want to click the whole thing and remove collection, and there's no undo button for that when you're done. And all of that work is to just get this uncategorized special collection as low as possible. And noticeably there are some things here that just are not categorized in any way, and sometimes it's not really explained why, because the second tag here is simulation, and in the library there is a category for simulations. I thought I had made that, but yeah, just trying to be more organized as far as things, to just have a better idea of looking at games. It's still a mess, undoubtedly. Like, if I was to, let's just see, try to go home and see your collections this way. Like, this is like not an easy way to scroll around, certainly, as far as just what games do I really want to play. And very rarely do I say, oh, I just want a stealth game, so let's click on stealth and then get to stealth categories. Also, each of these dynamic collections also have unplayed enabled in them, and whether it determines whether a game is played or not could mess with that status quite a bit. It is possible that is why there are these games at the bottom, is that I somehow accidentally started these programs and so they're considered played. And yeah, the home page is its own special thing on Steam. As far as the Steam library, I don't know how many people even look at it. As far as, here's some recent games that were installed but not played. Here's some games they're suggesting that I do play. Here's the playing category of things that I have installed, and then it really would just be scrolling down forever. Noticeably, a lot of these games never bothered to update their profile pictures, and so they have these blurred out, stretch out things. This was something Steam said you should update your information, your poster images, at least a year ago, if not 2 years ago. You do have a vast majority of people who are still trying to sell their games doing that, but like Telltale Games and Back to the Future, which you maybe can't even buy anymore, is not bothering with that. And then you have the occasional games that I just don't think have ever been updated. That probably gives more information to Valve than they're willing to use, as far as just saying, hey, you never updated this information. You should, we should kick you off our platform because you're just not within, you're just not responding, you're just not interacting. There is less reason, certainly, to do business with people who aren't even bothering to do the bare minimal effort. But everybody's making money, so nobody's going to complain. Here you can see, like, Blood Rain the original Blood Rain and Blood Rain 2 did not update their image, but the Blood Rain 2 Terminal Cut and Blood Rain Terminal Cut did update their information, whereas Blood Rain Betrayal Legacy didn't update their information. So you have older versions of games not getting that update. It would take forever to scroll down through the entire list here, though. Like, this is just no way to really shop, and there's no way to really adjust the images and these thumbnails. It's a nice experience, I guess, if you only had a few games, but once you start getting into the 400 or 500 plus range, and I'm at the closer to 2,000 range, it just falls apart. This is basically just playing menu hero, like so often you do when looking at Netflix, in which you would just scroll through all of these. A lot of these games, even if I see them, this Far-Sighted Fantasy, for instance, I don't remember ever buying it. I don't know what this game is. Four Kings Casino and Slots, I didn't know I even had that game. So I could look at this if I was bored not doing anything else. But it only is going to give you like a slight hint or a slight idea about what you're going to want to play next as a game. And we're already up to the H's, and I was expecting that I would see an adult game pop up here. Here we go, Honey Pop and Neptunia Games. I guess Honey Pop is doing you the favor by having a censored thumbnail. I wouldn't be surprised if all the adult games are required to kind of have censored thumbnails, because I was kind of half expecting that there would be something, there'd be at least one game here that would have a very lewd image, Lady Killer in a Bind or something, or that they'd have a very just straight up nudity on the thumbnail. Left 4 Dead, actually, perhaps the most gory thumbnail of all the ones available. Unfortunately, right next to all of the massive Lego things. And Lego is kind of a great example. It's like, you kind of would have to manually make a Lego collection. You could probably, nope, you can't, can you? You can't like select multiple of these, so you'd have to go here and just add it to a Lego over and over again, as far as making a special collection of Lego, which gets into the part of where you're going to potentially always want to have some kind of subcategory of kids games if you were going to do a family share and a restricted mode where only specific games could be accessed, seen, and played, which that whole mode is just not particularly well designed. Ideally, we need to go to the next generation where the Steam app itself would, in restricted mode, pop up a list of recommended games, and if the kid wanted to play something new, he would have to basically talk to you or ask you about it, and probably shouldn't even be able to look at the store or find new games, really. But there should be a lot more parental controls. It's just, hey, he's been playing this game too long. Although I have also seen parents that just bristle and are just, I don't want to say bad parents, but they're not understanding parents, as far as like, hey, if your kid is obsessed with, let's say, Lego the video game movie, and they've spent 300 hours in it, that's maybe not that big of a deal that they're just playing one game instead of playing multiple games. If you're already doing the screen time thing, if they're staying within the bounds of that, it seems extra restrictive to say you have a certain amount of screen time, and you can use it however you want. But nope, we don't like that you're playing too much of this game, or mostly it's parents don't like that they're talking about that game. They're excited about something, and parents are bristling at the fact that their kids are excited and just rambling on about the same thing over and over again, which you just can't control that, and you should just engage in the excitement. You also have the unfortunate comparison here too, that it goes straight from Lego Worlds to Leisure Suit Larry games, so just like adult game right next to it. But even in this case, we can see Leisure Suit Larry games, their thumbnails are not like pure nudity, so it does seem like there's some fairly restrictive things here. You can have some spooky scary, and you can have some gore. Lust from Beyond's thumbnail even here is pretty tame compared to some of their other thumbnails. But yeah, there needs to be better controls, and you can't really not make controls for Steam. Well, Valve is literally doing that at the moment, but they shouldn't just be making no controls for Steam, because there are some parents out there that are just, they just don't understand video games or obsession with video games, and they don't realize that there's a big difference between being obsessed with, say, Lego games and playing them over and over again, and potentially being obsessed with something that is totally inappropriate for them, like Leisure Suit Larry games, which yeah, they shouldn't ever have been. Kids shouldn't play that game. It really wouldn't mess them up mentally. I guess this is still all in the accountability section. I'm just really rambling today. I did finish No More Heroes. There's a lot of problems with No More Heroes, but the ending really does kind of turn it around. So I was a lot more happy just being done with the game, beating it on its medium difficulty, and then unlocking the hard difficulty. The problem there certainly is that you are split in two different directions. Like, I really think the game is probably a very bad port for PC, and you shouldn't play it on PC. And when you beat the game, it unlocks a ton more collectibles for no good reason. It's almost certainly the case that you should play No More Heroes on easy first, and that would have made it a lot easier to play it a second time on its hardest difficulty, if beating it on easy unlocks the hardest difficulty. The bitter difficulty is what it's called. I guess there is a case here where if you hover over this, you are just going to be seeing the screenshot. So if I hovered over something like Night Trap, it very possibly might show something inappropriate there. So you really are just one mouse hover away from something potentially adult content, even if these thumbnails are somewhat censored. But yeah, because there's an achievement for beating No More Heroes 1 on its hardest difficulty, there's really no reason to try and get all the collectibles. The collectibles are crazy in the second playthrough. If anything, it would be better just to get a full unlock save file if you wanted to see what the collectibles in the concept art unlocked. There's really no story in No More Heroes 1 until the last couple hours, and that story really should have been hinted at and spread out throughout the entirety of the game. Even if at the long run the story is that the story is dumb and silly. And so, yeah, it just has way too much problems to make an argument that I would want to play it a second time, even though the game really, really wants you to play it a second time. And I think your best bet would have been to have played No More Heroes 1 on easiest, rush through it, just get the general story and general experience, and then rush to No More Heroes 2, which I think, fingers crossed, fixes a lot of the problems of No More Heroes 1, and I hope it is just a better PC port that controls a little bit better. Because you are going to, even playing on easy, probably be very unlikely to get gold on all of the side missions, side jobs, assassination gigs. And without doing that, you won't get an achievement. Uh, you're going to, if you play it on normal first instead of playing it on easy, you're going to get less money. And in getting less money, you're going to have a harder time unlocking all of the items. I don't even know if there is actually an achievement for unlocking all of the clothing items. It seems like it really is just a bad system. Some of these games I definitely have played before too, so all of these games are actually on the list of games that I would play. Rage is kind of a great example of a game that I should play, but Rage 2 I don't even own, and it is not a super relevant game. Raptor I have some history with, but it would be a hard game to point out and cover too, because it will just be a difficult game. And then you have software like RetroArch that is not actually a game, and I made a category specifically for software. Yeah. So after beating, Sakura Clicker here is probably the most lewd thumbnail we've seen here, and Sakura Clicker in particular isn't actually, there's no nudity in it. It's just animal anthropomorphic character anime girls with some cleavage. It's not even that extreme. But yeah, after finishing No More Heroes, and this is going to be the longest accountability section ever, and I'm not playing Yu-Gi-Oh, which I think that also just highlights something. I started playing a game called Dicey Dungeon, and I made quite a large amount of content around Dicey Dungeon, but there definitely seems like there's a lot more content to make. Shadow Man is kind of a good comparison in that this remake of Shadow Man, that he added content where compared to No More Heroes, it feels like there's some cut content in No More Heroes. It honestly feels like No More Heroes 1 is a combination of gameplay content that was actually supposed to be for a completely different game that got canceled, and that the last second Grasshopper manufacturer just said, let's copy and paste all this canceled content together and make our own story and slap it on there and sell it. Otherwise, we're likely going to go bankrupt. Where I would like to see something more like the Shadow Man remaster with No More Heroes 1, or just a straight up remake where they either add more story, add more content, or just redo everything. And maybe No More Heroes does a soft reboot anyway, so maybe it doesn't matter. This is one of those web pages, which is basically all this is, where there's not a lot of places where you can put the mouse where you aren't hovering on something anyways. Some of these Civilization games, for instance, I own them, but it would be very hard to do anything other than a spotlight on any of those games because they are so long. And then you have like Sigils of Elohim, which is a small tie-in to the Talos Principle side game that has very little relevancy, even being a good game, in that the Talos Principle is losing relevancy, if it ever had any, by being so old and them not likely making a new Talos Principle. I guess I have Space Channel 5 Part 2 and not Part 1 somehow. That may be because it's sold differently. What doesn't happen here, though, is I don't look at this list and have anything that just like jumps straight out to my face. There's some games I don't recognize, like Still Life 2. But yeah, most of these games all fall into that same messy montage, that mixed soup of visual colors. So it would be really hard for anything to stand out. Here's the Talos Principle, which I guess you could remake the Talos Principle and put different puzzles on it. It probably wouldn't be much of a different experience, and you probably should just call that the Talos Principle 2 if you were going to do that, even if you're not really changing anything. Some of these joke games, like There's Poop in My Soup, I don't think are going to work nowadays as well as they may have worked 5 to 6 years ago. And then you have some games that are really old, like the original Tomb Raider games, which would be pretty impossible to even get it to run well. And particularly in Tomb Raider cases, there's Tomb Raider Anniversary, which I believe redoes Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3. I'm not sure if it gets Tomb Raider The Last Revelation or Tomb Raider Chronicles or the Angel of Darkness as Tomb Raider 6. So 4, 5, 6. I don't know if it does all of those. Tomb Raider Legend, I don't even know what that does. And Tomb Raider Underworld, I don't know what game that does. But yeah, we are on the second soft reboot, or hard reboot, of the Lara Croft Tomb Raider series now with this Tomb Raider game, and they're about to reboot it, or do a soft reboot for a third time. This Umahari Kawase game is a unique game in that the main character ages up every expansion, which, I mean, technically I guess Lara Croft could be getting 1 year older in between each of these games, or a couple years older, but starting as an adult, there's just not that drastic visual change. But that is also not particularly the most iconic way to make a game, in which you have a different looking character or an older version of a character as your thumbnail each time. The Vagrant, I guess, is the most lewd thumbnail, and it really sells itself on this warrior having bikini armor, and it isn't actually, doesn't deliver on that, and it isn't particularly a great game. The Walking Dead, I suppose, has the little girl in the episodes that she is in get older. So here she is in the first one, and then she's a little bit older in the New Frontier. She barely shows up for like one scene, I think, in Michonne. Here she is in season 2. So from the first main season to the second main season, she goes up quite a bit, and then the final season she's even older. I felt like there was more Walking Dead games, but maybe not. So I guess that is the only other case I've seen where you have a character grow older, although in The Walking Dead also pretty much everybody else dies. Undoubtedly too, the story would have gone in a different direction had people not really responded to the little girl. You could have easily seen them try to have just different characters every season, totally different locations, different people, and nobody coming back. The Witcher drastically changes, I think, in both the way the games are visually made and the personality of Geralt of Rivia, but he's magically the same age, so he looks pretty much the same in each game. Let's see. Is there any other games here worth talking about? X-Blade sells itself on bikini outfits too, so there's another image. But yeah, the fact that I can scroll through the whole list of games is actually a little surprising there. I would have thought the list was a lot longer than that. And yet, it isn't. Interesting. As for Dicey Dungeon, which I said to play, yeah, I'm gonna certainly have to spend a week grinding through it, and there is a very high chance that you'll just fail a couple times. It's sort of like Binding of Isaac if you were to reduce the amount of items in Binding of Isaac. I don't think this game is going to really unlock a lot of actions you can do, because you have this limiting factor that you roll a dice that is 1 to 6 always, and so you can only have so many actions do something slightly different based on whether you rolled a 1 to 6 die. There are some actions that can be activated on any even number, even odd number, anything below 3, anything above 3, doubles. I haven't seen anything that activates if you roll triples. There are special abilities for the 6, maybe 7 character classes, and each 6 or 7 character classes has 6 episodes, which are just rule variations that increase the difficulty. So it does have this weird grid where you start with the warrior, and they say that to play as the warrior is the easiest difficulty, and then with each new character you unlock, the difficulty goes up, but then each episode for each of the characters is also more difficult, so there's potentially difficulty on top of difficulty multiplied if you're playing as like the witch, which is the latest character I've unlocked, but probably not the last character. The dungeon crawling aspects on it are very simple. There seems to be consistently only 6 floors, and a maximum number of times you can level up your character, and the maximum amount of health at 64 that you can get. So, like, no single dungeon crawling experience can be that long, but it can be long enough. You could easily spend an hour and then die at the boss battle and at the end, and that could suck. But I'm not anticipating that happening a lot. I don't know if I'm going to unlock any new abilities or anything that might make the game easier, but the game does have just a relaxed mode anyway, so you can at any time, allegedly not affecting any of the achievements, of which there are at least 50 plus, you can reduce the health of all your opponents by 25%. So 25% reduction in health would definitely make the game much more relaxed, and I could see myself just flipping the relaxed mode on fairly quickly as a way of just being efficient with time. A lot of Dicey Dungeons seems to really boil down to being efficient with time. I see Cy the Bunny on the chat said hello, so I'll say hello back. Now on this Friday, it's not like there's no new news, so me talking for an hour and just showing off dynamic categories or grouping on the Steam interface was a choice, certainly, maybe not a good choice. Mark Fraser is on the chat saying hi also, so I'll say hi back to that. I don't think a ton of new news has happened over the past couple days, but enough. TubeBuddy is asked on Twitter to drop your channel name below. They want to hear the most unique ones. So I dropped my YouTube handle, which at the moment is youtube.com/@RydoOfall, RYDOOFALL. I would like it to be just at Rydo, RYDO, but the way they rolled out the handles is that anybody who just happened to have that shortened URL or name in general earlier got that given to them. So the person who has @Rydo on YouTube literally has like 2 videos and hasn't posted in 10 plus years and has like maybe 1 subscriber. Not that my 508 subscribers really trounces that, but it definitely, the amount of videos I have trounces that, and the amount of effort. Like, the other person literally should just have their channel private. So yeah, YouTube did a terrible job with rolling out the handles, and didn't take into accounting people who may accidentally just be squatting on handles that would make a lot more sense. But undoubtedly, if TubeBuddy does anything with that, it's probably going to be TubeBuddy making fun of bizarre channel names and trying to make some kind of video for their own benefit to say your channel name should make more sense. But I'm not sure they could make too much success there, in that you have Good Mythical Morning or PewDiePie being some of the biggest channels out there, and their names don't really make any sense either. Mark Fraser asked a couple times, "Can I duel you?" No, sorry, I'm not dueling people at the moment. I'm barely playing Yu-Gi-Oh at all, and I'm just doing it for the daily quests. And you can't make progress on the daily quest and make progress of getting up to ranked, which you also have to work towards that if you're dueling friends. So there still is just no benefit to duel friends, other than the direct benefit of dueling people you select. Sighted Bunny said, "Hey, today I found out there's another one-turn one-shot called Utopia, or one-turn one-shot Utopia," which I'm sure that's some kind of new meta deck that is in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, but I don't pay enough attention to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel to be able to speak to it. So, yeah. The problem with a one-turn one-shot almost certainly would be that it is probably pretty dangerous, and you probably have to get pretty lucky. If it works consistently, that'd be great for now, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Would almost certainly nerf something to stop it from working consistently. It would really ruin the card game if people are just winning in one-turn one-shot actions. Like, it's okay if on 1 out of every million games you have somebody draw all of the 5 pieces of Exodia, but it's not okay if there's an actual, before the opponent even can play or counter your action, they can always summon Exodia and win. And usually yep. Usually the one-turn one-shots are like way too long anyways. Not particularly fun. Alright, well, let's start going through the video game news since I rambled. The Amazon Games San Diego studio, John Smedley, is stepping down. We had talked about this at the end of the last stream. He has been working at Amazon for 6 years and hasn't shipped a single game. I definitely feel like, and I think generally people feel like this is a case where Amazon had a lot of money. It's frankly just getting a ton of money by increasing Amazon Prime fees and just being a great monopoly as far as online selling in general. And then they tried to get into video games in a lot of ways. They bought Twitch, and Twitch has not made them any major success. If anything, Amazon is trying to make it so people forget that they own Twitch. They bought Twitch, and then they made Twitch Gaming as giving away free games, and then they renamed Twitch Gaming to Amazon Prime Gaming. They've been working on their own engine, Lumberyard, which that was always going to cost a ridiculous amount of money to possibly build your own engine. And then they've been trying to make several games, and all of those games have just been canceled, probably in part because Amazon as a company is just not used to long-term investments such as a publishing company would have to be used to, where you would have to fund and just pay money through the nose for 4 to 10 years before you even had a game that came out. Also, at least one of the Amazon games that came and went was supposed to be a Lord of the Rings game. So then you're involving Warner Brothers and a license who are going to make it a lot more complicated. And certainly Warner Brothers being acquired by AT&T makes a lot of those projects unlikely to have ever succeeded. The thing that I guess you would have had to have done, and that Amazon was not willing to do because Amazon, I assume, thinks that they can just work at a massive scale and fix any problem by working at bigger scales. Instead, what they should have done is they should have had a Tiny Skunkworks game. They probably Tiny Skunkworks gaming division. They should have hired maybe one big name person to be in charge of it with a lot of passion, but they shouldn't have allowed that big name person to potentially then just try to blow the budget by hiring a bunch of people that are also big name programmers or people he knows to potentially just give them a paycheck. I can't help but feel like John Smedley may have just straight up played Amazon.com by hiring a bunch of his friends and giving them paychecks to work on projects that had no chance of ever seeing the light. Which at a certain point, I mean, I guess that is what a director of a game company's job might be, is just to make sure everybody's paid well and happy, despite the fact that consumers actually want a final product and an actual video game to be made. There definitely are some third-party video game companies out there that don't have but 1 or 2 titles to their name, and yet all the employees are well cared for, and you can't call that a total failure. Yeah, can't really do anything here. But yeah, John Smedley stepping down at this point, I have to say, is probably a good thing. Like, the other thing here, certainly, as this opens up some speculation, is because most of these upper management type people don't fail downward, they fail upward. So we may very quickly see that he goes from being a Sony Online Entertainment president to an Amazon Games president. I think that's what he was. And then he maybe goes back to Sony, which Sony certainly could use some help in that department too, where a new person in charge would maybe start to point like YouTube into a new person in charge of Sony might point Sony in a different direction to be a little bit more successful. Yeah, Cy the Bunny said a while ago, sorry for my talking, I don't know what he meant there. Smiley face. And then he said, what the heck, after a bunch of spam was just posted, a bunch of emoji chat spam. Yeah, last stream I started getting these emoji chat spam. YouTube, Google in general has gotten worse and worse about spam. Email spam in Gmail in particular is just not getting caught as much. It's gotten worse, which, yeah, maybe Google and Gmail just aren't doing as good of a job as they once did, or maybe they just don't care. YouTube spam has always been a problem. It would be fairly easy to say, hey, if somebody is putting 3 emojis in a row, I would flag that as spam first. Like, yes, I know there are a lot of people in a lot of other kinds of chats that probably would do like 100, 100, 100 or heart, heart, heart or something like that, but I would definitely start to look at channels that are putting out tons of posts real fast with emoji stuff. The emojis don't even matter at all. There's a website in the YouTube channel's name that they're trying to get you to go to. It has nothing to do with the emojis at all. Let's see. Moving on to new news. Saudi Arabia has increased its stake in Nintendo. The Kingdom's Public Interest Fund is one of Nintendo's largest shareholders. They brought it up to 6%, I believe. It's been reported. You get into this weird situation, certainly, in that there is definitely a lot of thought that Saudi Arabia is trying to buy influence by investing into a lot of video game companies and just companies in general, and that there is perhaps a danger in a state run by the prince himself, but like a state-run company owning foreign companies in other countries. And yeah, there definitely is feels like there's a danger there and some weirdness. On the other hand, you could argue that maybe he's trying to invest into a long-term situation as far as maintaining the economic status of his country, or at least himself, by diversifying. Noticeably, if you are... Man, I am not activating any effects here. Is that because something here is stopping that from happening? Like, I could see an argument made, certainly, that the Middle Eastern countries like Saudi Arabia probably have a massive amount of oil wealth now, but at some point in the next few decades, when cars go all to electric, you won't have oil being as valuable as it once was, and then countries that got rich from oil are going to go back to being countries that have very little value to them, And I know that some of the Middle Eastern countries, I don't know if it's specifically Saudi Arabia because I'm ignorant and just not well informed of the Middle East as I probably should be. But I know some of those countries do pay every citizen a amount of income based off the oil fields and income. I also know some of those oil fields are straight up being drilled and handled by foreign entities, and that because when they originally found oil in those areas, the countries just didn't have enough infrastructure internally to have their own local companies run it, and so a lot of their resources were exploited by other countries. But yeah, I think you can't rely too much on that argument. There's definitely influence on top of that is being bought by the Saudi Arabian Public Interest Fund investing in video game companies. In all fairness, so far they have not tried to get any kind of controlling shares in any one company, or even really that much of an interest in any one company that it feels like they are getting much influence. And I heard like a rumor that the same public interest fund had bought the WWE. That rumor seems to not have been followed up on at all. So if that does come out in the next couple of days, they have yet to follow up on it. But yeah, in a lot of ways, it does also feel like the prince is just kind of obsessed with video games and wrestling and just popular entertainment and investing a lot in those things instead of investing in, let's say, like medical companies or drug companies, things like that. Nestle, food companies, things like that. And you definitely would not get as much influence if you had invested in, say, a drug company that just makes a drug and can't really make political comments or forms of art. But it could definitely be slow and nefarious too. Like the fear is valid that all of a sudden, a decade from now, 20% of every video game company is owned by the Saudi Arabia, and then all of a sudden all the characters are wearing more conservative clothes, straight up wearing burqas. If by default every character is a brown person doing their daily prayers, so praying to Allah, things like that, just religion and culture being pushed. Even if the religion isn't pushed, if it's just by default every character is Saudi Arabian and they are doing Saudi Arabian things, that would be weird, and that would definitely be the outcome of one possible outcome of buying influence there. We've seen it in Hollywood all over the place. Mulan basically was only created by Disney in the hopes of breaking into China. Disney made multiple movies and Hollywood made lots of movies trying to break into China, only to be rejected by China just because of their heavy desire to control and censor things, and frankly the Chinese audience not actually interested in seeing movies that pander to China. Had China done it a little bit better and really embraced Hollywood and just allowed Hollywood to prostitute itself to Chinese censors, then we would probably see a considerably higher number of Chinese pandering movies coming out of Hollywood. Instead, what happened though is Hollywood ran out of money and is now just failing completely, which we don't want to see that happen with video games either. Moving on, I'm talking way too much today. A new PlayStation 5 system update has been released that adds DualSense Edge support, which it also improves system performance, which they all say that they improve system performance, so that's nothing. I don't understand why a DualSense Edge controller wouldn't have been supported on the PlayStation 5 in the first place. Like DualSense Edge wireless controllers, I don't think those are brand new. DualSense Edge is Sony's new premium PlayStation controller priced at $200. That's ridiculously high. It was launched January 26. Okay, so it is brand new and they had to literally update their systems to support it. Let's see. Button remapping, the ability to fine-tune stick sensitivity triggers, options to swap between multiple controller profiles and a unique on-controller user interface. So between the DualSense Edge and the accessibility controller that's a PlayStation 5 exclusive also, it seems like Sony is trying to make more and more money off accessories, and $200 for a pro controller, even a pro controller, is still way too much. I can't help but always feel when I'm playing Flowandries that I end up then playing against other Flowandries decks that are just better than mine. It's annoying to say the least. Okay. If I could get something that was above 1,000, I could possibly flip this face down with this. One of the problems, certainly with PlayStation's controllers, is that their naming scheme does not stand out particularly well, and the features in their controllers are a little too varied, so I don't really know if these are the controllers with the force feedback triggers, or if this is the controller with the motion sensing in which you can tilt the whole controller and has like a bar that the PlayStation Eye can look at as far as an LED bar in the back. I don't even know if they're still doing the LED bar in the back. I think the motion controlling aspect is kind of being abandoned. Like, there isn't a single controller for the PlayStation that seems to have all the features that they've experimented with and that they've actually released games around. If anything, they should have just been better at naming things and a bit more conservative on when they rolled out new features, to the point of saying that they would only put out a new controller when they put out a new system. If the PlayStation 5 controllers, for instance, all had force feedback, if they all had force feedback triggers, but all abandoned the motion controllers, that'd be alright, but then the numbering system is also a problem, because, yeah. I don't know what DualSense inherently means, and I don't know what the Edge part means. It would make more sense if this was called the DualSense Pro. You don't get a lot of that, though, where people say our DualSense technology means this, or our Edge technology means that, where that used to be the way gadgets were advertised quite a bit, is you'd make up some kind of ridiculous name for a technology that is actually fairly simplistic, just as a buzzword and as a way of advertising. But now, even looking at some of the videos from CES, our Matter smart home technology, what does Matter mean? Nobody can explain it. Or with Thread interconnecting technology, what does Thread mean? What's the difference between Thread and Matter? Nobody can explain it well enough to the average citizen. And all I can say is generally as far as smart home technology, Matter and Thread and all of that seems to be still a little too beta to recommend anybody building a smart home on these new technologies. It very much could be like Bluetooth Classic or the first version of Bluetooth, which was a pretty terrible technology, and it's not until they made multiple updates to Bluetooth to get to, I think, Bluetooth version 5 now, where you're starting to really make sense. Bluetooth Low Energy version 5 in particular. And I think at version 2 of Bluetooth, they basically reset everything and started over from scratch with BLE. Moving on, 71% of UK PlayStation 5 owners say it's their main consoles versus only 48% of Xbox Series X owners saying the same, research finds. It is always shocking to me how successful the PlayStation seems to be. But yeah, it definitely seems like it's way more successful than I would think. I grew up playing Nintendo games, so if anything, I was a Nintendo fanboy for most of my youth. I moved over to an Xbox 360. I never had an original Xbox. I played a lot of games on the Xbox 360, and that got me used to the Xbox controllers. And then when I moved over to playing on PC, it was just very natural to play on an Xbox controller. And I assume most people who are playing on PC, if they're using a controller at all, which maybe half of PC gamers are just doing mouse and keyboard, but I assume anybody who is playing with a controller is probably playing with an Xbox style controller on PC, if not an official Xbox controller. So I guess I'm an Xbox controller fanboy. I definitely, though, trying to be as objective as possible, would recommend getting an Xbox Series X over a PlayStation 5 if you have no consoles at all. I think you'll get more used Xbox 360 game discs that way that you can put into an Xbox Series S. You'll get Xbox Game Pass or Game Pass Ultimate, which will give you a lot more free games. You're just going to have a better experience if you want a diversity and a large collection of video games. You could get more video games if you just went straight to PC gaming, obviously, but I could see why parents wouldn't want to buy a gaming PC for their 10, 11, 12-year-old. Man, I've got this controller in the wrong place, and I just don't have anywhere to put it. And I just hit the right bump, and I didn't realize that the right bump had all these button press prompts on it. Well, that would be fairly hard to control using a controller. Let's see. Because I didn't put a table to the left of me, and the table to the right of me is actually far behind. There. Let's see. I think I've put it down now. There we go. I guess PlayStation exclusives still work fairly well. And in particular, when you look at like UK players, I suspect that there are still a lot of Call of Duty and FIFA only players in the UK. That's the only thing I could really assume, is that they just aren't buying a lot of games, and thus PlayStation not having as good of a Xbox Game Pass equivalent doesn't matter. And that's probably a sad statement on really the state of video games, is that a lot of these numbers get manipulated to say, yeah, there's a ton of gamers, particularly if you're including people who just play games on their cell phones and would never own a console in the first place, or they're just playing old 90s games on Steam and that's it. There's probably a lot of old people that are just playing Peggle or Solitaire and have Steam installed to play that one game and that one game only. They don't actively download new games or buy new games. But yeah, I do get the feeling that if I was to be super elitist and run my own personal survey as far as people playing games, and I said, do you play more than 4 games per year? And what consoles do you play them on, or do you play them on PC? And if somebody isn't playing at least 4 games a year, I'm not considering them a gamer, then the numbers of gamers would probably significantly decrease to what is probably more of a realistic number that you would have seen in the 90s or earlier. That is definitely an elitist way to potentially run that survey, but it'd probably give you a better feeling of what the truth is, or what you would really call a gamer. In the same way, back when I was an anime obsessed otaku, I really wouldn't consider somebody an otaku or an anime fan if they had just watched Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, and maybe 2 or 3 other series. And there definitely was a lot of elitism like that around anime fandom back in the day, and well, probably not so much as it's become more open and accepting. Nowadays, if somebody has only really watched Bleach or Full Metal Alchemist or Naruto, they are welcomed with open arms by most anime fans, because it being such a niche genre, they saw more benefits in having more fandom, more fans included into the group. But yeah, at a certain level, I am kind of elitist at a certain level, and I don't consider people who buy FIFA and maybe a wrestling game and Modern Warfare and maybe Call of Duty, maybe 2 Call of Duty type games. I don't really consider those people gamers. I just don't. I think they are fair weather fans in the same way that football fans in America who only watch the Super Bowl are not likely to be considered hardcore football fans by other football fans. It is better that people are out there actively playing those 4 games and having consoles. It's better for sales, it's better for the industry. But those fair weather fans that are only playing 2 or 3 games a year definitely should not be counted in the same numbers. Okay. So now I'm just going to go ahead and activate this now, but that's probably a mistake. Let's see how much that does. I'm just going to activate this a second time and see if that cancels this effect. And I'm going to activate this and try and cancel that effect. I fell down the rank as I was playing here, and okay, great. That worked out fairly well, but he does have 3 cards to work around that. At a certain level, though, I probably am just a little bit wrong too. There must be something in the advertising, or just the momentum of people who had PlayStation 2s, PlayStation 3s, that has pushed people to stick with PlayStations. In particular, there's not a lot of mistakes I can even say were made with the PlayStation 4, other than the fact that the PlayStation 4 was not backward compatible with the PlayStation 3, which is more of a mistake around the PlayStation 3 being so weird. But even at that time, the PlayStation 3 being weird still had some pretty good exclusives. And then the PlayStation 5's main mistake, I think, is just that it doesn't have as many exclusives or as many good games on it. And it came out probably a little too early. If anything, the competition between the Xbox and PlayStation led to too many new units, and we really should be closer to an Xbox One X and a PlayStation 4. Those consoles should be the consoles that are available at the moment. And then if this year they had announced the Series X with just a little bit of a bump in stats and the PlayStation 5, that would have been nice. Like, the console cycles need to get longer and longer because they're getting more and more expensive, and the idea of having to replace any kind of computer equivalent that often is not an idea anybody ever enjoyed, and not something that really needs to happen. There's not that many new technologies or gimmicks to sell us on new consoles. If they were to announce a new PlayStation or Xbox right now, it would be very laughable that people would really want to buy it, because not that much really would have changed, and yet people would buy it, uncertainly. Let's see, moving on. Xbox Germany says it will announce Forza and Redfall release dates on the live stream, which, okay, that's probably similar to that Xbox Direct, Developer Direct showcase on January 25th. I suspect that's what they're talking about. Nintendo Switch and FIFA 23 led European game sales in 2022, which, yeah, FIFA and soccer in general just being super, super popular. So this isn't just the UK, this is Europe sales. FIFA, Call of Duty, Elden Ring, GTA, FIFA again, Pokemon, God of War Ragnarok, Lego Star Wars made the list, Horizon Forbidden West, Gran Turismo 7, Mario Kart, Red Dead Redemption 2 made the list, surprisingly. Not a Pokemon, not a Nintendo game, an F1 racing game, not a Pokemon game, Minecraft. Assassin's Creed Valhalla made the list, Kirby and the Forgotten Land. I actually watched a speedrun from Games Done Quick that came out with the Kirby All-Star Allies game, and yeah, that's more of a 2D side-scrolling game that's nothing like the Forgotten Land. Mario Party All-Stars. Now, notably, if you get rid of all the Nintendo stuff, then and just assume that that is a different audience, those are little kids, you're left with the usual suspects, with maybe a little bit of an exception here in Elden Ring. Elden Ring also being about the only game that an adult would play that is from a Japanese company, Nintendo owning everything else. Sony is not. It'd be hard to say Horizon Forbidden West is really a Japanese game from a Japanese company at this point. Technically, Sony is a Japanese company, but it's being run from Sony Interactive Entertainment in California, so not really. And then you have one Ubisoft game from France. But yeah, this is definitely my feelings as far as what most UK players are, and that probably most European players, is that they are buying fewer games and less diverse games. Of course, best-selling lists are always going to give you the best sellers, so it's no surprise that there isn't some small indie nobody's ever heard of in the best-selling list. That would just never happen. It is a little surprising that the Lego game was listed, because that certainly could have gone unlisted, and I guess the Star Wars franchise and making yet another Lego Star Wars game allowed for them to make a decent amount of sales. That being said, I don't think TT Games, Lego games, have a lot of hope going forward, because Warner Brothers owns TT Games, and I think there's a lot of room for games to not be allowed to be made as they're being acquired by AT&T, or as AT&T has acquired them. Fingers crossed they do get more licenses for more games. It would make a lot of sense for them to actually make a new Harry Potter Lego game if Hogwarts Legacy is going to sell as well as it seems like it is going to. It would make a lot of sense for them to do another one of those games anyways. It would also make a lot of sense for them to try to do another Lord of the Rings games, particularly considering how the Lego Lord of the Rings games weren't particularly even that good. Okay. We very possibly are screwed at this point. Let's do this. Do this. Activate this. I don't think there's anything I can do here that's gonna save the day. I think I could do something like this and do a direct attack, but I can't get another Zeus on the field. So what I would have had to have done is been able to direct attack now, and then possibly direct attack again. See, I could link summon maybe this, and then summon that. Let's try it. Take this, then take this one, and then take this one. You do that. Activate this. Put that in the hand. No, I don't think that worked. I was thinking that this card would have been able to grab the extra value of this card and attach it. I'm gonna have to stop playing at this point. I've rambled too much and not played enough. I guess maybe if you got really lucky, but I don't know what I could do to get really lucky here. See. I take this one and I can activate this one now as a chain, I guess. And then from that, I guess we'll special summon this in defense position as well. Guess maybe if I put this in defense position and it was pointing to it, it might have done something more. See if maybe we'll try that next time. Have it point. Because if this had gone from this to 2,400 to 4,400, that would have been somewhat helpful. Still really wouldn't have changed anything. Honestly, I guess if I just get another Zodiac thing and do a direct attack next turn, I could win there. Do it the hard way. Video Games Chronicles says Marvel Snap's PvP update is scheduled to launch in late January. We saw some announcements around that. As far as what these series drops are, the phrasing and terminology does not make any sense at all. Series basically means rarity as far as I understand it, and they're lowering the rarity. Let's see. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's next patch will arrive in February. They say next patch because it doesn't seem like it's likely to be the last, I would assume. Pokemon Home's mobile app will also receive an update next month. Better this February than next February, I guess. But yeah, Pokemon was released very badly. The Epic Games Store next free title has been revealed. Epic Story will replace the first Classic Trouble, Divine Knockout, and Game Deck, which are currently free. So yeah, First Class Trouble, which I'll have to double check to make sure I've gotten those games, even though I am just getting the games for a backup storefront collection, just in case my Steam account ever got deleted for some reason. Bicycle Adventure Season, A Letter to the Future, gets a new story trailer. This is a game I have not committed to memory if I've seen anything about it before. It's an indie title. One of the other games that I saw them speedrun was Fez, and if anything, watching a speedrun of Fez really just comments on how much some indie games were very much overhyped, in particular by Giant Bomb of many years ago, where they would just talk about games like Fez over and over again and over promote them and over discuss them. And yeah, Fez is a fine game. Braid is a fine game. Did they deserve as much coverage as they got? No, in no way. And now, many years away from those small indie games that were critical darlings, have those indie developers made anything else? Not really. Some of them probably have made some other games, but I don't know if any of them were good or things people liked. I'm going to activate this one. My hope here is that I can draw a Zodiac card. But we'll see. see how far we can get with this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Last thing, I can summon this now. See if he's got any more traps or cancels. So we do 200 damage. $950 damage. You can use the effect from Regal to working cards on the field. Let's see. Well, it doesn't seem like I can activate that effect in the graveyard, so I probably screwed up at some point here. Yeah, it doesn't seem like I can do anything. Seems like I've lost. Whatever. Moving on to video game news. Hogwarts Legacy PC specs, depending on how much you have on the field. Cider Bunny continues. He's also 30 seconds delayed, so his advice probably was more relevant 30 seconds ago. Alright. My hope would be that maybe this would cancel something. But I doubt it will. Yep. Then Cider Bunny says rest in peace, so 30 seconds ago I probably did the thing that ruined the move. Yeah, obviously, even having played Tri-Brigade quite a bit, I've not learned all the strategies and all the cards well enough, and that all just comes down to not paying attention. Just, it's impossible to pay attention and try and cover video game news. And video game news is now very much the more important thing with YouTube Shorts, getting me new subscribers and massive views. Although the amount of views I'm getting is, as far as watch time, is not great. Like, I was looking at the requirements to become partnered again, and I would have to have like a massive push for watch time. And then there was a YouTube bug, certainly, that lost me, I think, and everybody on YouTube, a lot of views that aren't being reported, and I bet they'll never go back and fix that. That happened a few days ago. Alright, let's burn through the news as fast as possible now. Hogwarts Legacy PC specs have been revealed. The game will require at least 85 gigabytes of space on a PC. There used to be a time where people could have a 128 gigabyte SSD and play games on it, but now it's clearly getting to a point where you need at least 256 gigabytes, and even at that, some of these bigger games are only going to allow you to install 1 or 2 games on top of the operating system. There hasn't really felt like there's been a major improvement in like 3D NAND NVRAM technology, so at some point I probably do need to buy a new SSD um, that's bigger, but I don't know if it wouldn't just be smarter to buy a second M2 stick, NVRAM stick, for games exclusively instead of trying to have one big disk drive for the operating system and one for games. Um, but yeah, people generally don't want to buy two of things. So yeah, as far as other specs, a 3.3 gigahertz processor or a Ryzen 5 1400 series, minimum 16 gigabytes of RAM, up from what you might expect as 8, a GeForce GTX 960 or AMD Radeon RX 470 4 gigabytes, DirectX version 12, 85 gigabytes of hard drive space, and SSD being preferred, and then hard disk drive being supported, and that's to get 720p at 30 frames per second, low quality settings, which at this point that really shouldn't even be an option, I think, for video games. 1080p 60 I think should be the minimum for low specs. The recommended high specs does not change the amount of storage you have, but it is going now for 1080 60 high quality settings, and wants at least a 1080 Ti, which isn't asking that much, but it's still kind of hard to get graphics cards. The number of processing actually goes down here, 3.3 for an i5 versus 3.2 for an i7. So what's the big difference there? It's the number of actual cores you're going to have. An i5 probably is going to be 4 cores at 8 threads. An i7 is probably going to be 6 cores or 8 cores at 12 or 16 threads. So that does imply that this game is multi-threaded to a level in which that would actually be helpful. The ultra specs and ultra 4K specs just increasing those numbers ever so much more. A 2080 Ti for ultra specs to get to 1440 60 frames per second, which this is in particular why I still don't really have any reason to try to go above 1080p, is because if I was to record at this ratio and then upload it to YouTube, very few people would have any benefit of seeing it at that. It's better to have a smoother frame rates at 1080p for YouTube content, and frankly my eyes probably are not that good these days where I could actually notice the difference between 1440. Also, I'm still playing PC like a console, so I'm looking at a TV that's 8 feet away, so there's probably not anything I could even read at 1440. I'm having increasing trouble reading text at just because of the text getting smaller because the resolution's going up. And then you need 32 gigabytes of RAM once you start getting into these ultra specs. Particularly, I still feel like 32 to 64 gigabytes of RAM is the best thing you could do to make a better computer if you're a multitasker and more ADD, which I think people probably more are, or more of that, compared to bumping up from even a 3.2 gigahertz to a 3.8 gigahertz processor. You're not going to see that much difference there in the processor as much unless you're rendering videos or something like that. Bumping up from a 1080 to a 2080 is, both of these being TIs, that's going to be a lot of money difference for a little reward. And then the ultra specs, they're just telling you have to have a 3090 Ti. I'm surprised they didn't just bother to say you have to have a 4080 Ti for the ultra 4K specs. The 85 gigabytes hard drive space, though, definitely seems like a lot, but that almost certainly means there's a lot of music and a lot of animation cutscenes in Hogwarts Legacy, which will make for a more interesting experience, I guess. 85 gigabytes does not come about by having a giant open world text file alone or anything like that. A lot of textures, a lot of variety in what you're seeing. Moving on, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's next 7-star Terra raid will feature a mystery Pokemon. I don't know what half of that even means. Pokemon will appear at level 100 and feature the Mightiest mark. I assume Pokemon fans will know what that means. Hogwarts Legacy, PS5, and Xbox Series X graphics modes have been detailed if you want to check this out. Fidelity mode runs at 30, performance at 60 frames per second. If it takes 85 gigabytes on consoles to play Hogwarts Legacy, that's quite a lot of space. Like, there isn't a ton of space in consoles, and you still have to consider the amount of data you could get on a single disc as it is. So if it is one Blu-ray disc that's maybe 50 gigabytes of space, then we're getting to a point where you might have 2 discs for Hogwarts Legacy, or just a major amount of compression or a major amount of downloaded content that you have to add to it. Yeah, I don't know if you can get to 85 gigabytes on an Ultra Blu-ray disc these days. New Skull and Bones release date is coming very soon, following the latest date. I don't know why they'd even bother to announce a date. This is like the 6th delay. And then funny thing, Skull and Bones, looking at the screenshots, actually looks more interesting than a couple of the other pirate games I've seen. But the Microsoft pirate game has been out in at least early access for 2 or 3 years, whereas Skull and Bones has been delayed like crazy. Nvidia and Google have, quote, expressed concerns to the FTC about the Microsoft Activision deal. The new report claims the companies joined Sony in raising issues about the proposed acquisition. I guess the question there is, why would Nvidia or Google raise concerns? Well, I guess maybe if Microsoft gets stronger, then Nvidia has less of a bargaining chip for putting their graphics cards in the next console. AMD or ATI is putting their graphics chips currently in consoles. So yeah, it's been a while since an Nvidia graphics chip has been in an Xbox. So maybe this is just them trying to sabotage somebody that they're not really in business with. I assume Google has the exact same interest, as that they just want to try and screw over Microsoft. On the face of it, it seems like that would be the reason without actually reading this article. Google, on the other hand, certainly is in a position where they probably should be trying to acquire more game companies. If Google or Alphabet wasn't so ADHD and quick to abandon projects, they should have acquired multiple game companies when they were trying to push Stadia, and they should have acquired multiple game companies when they tried to push Google Play games on mobile. Like, there should be a major gaming division under Alphabet or Google, and it's just not there. High on Life and Rick and Morty creator Justin Roiland, I'll say Roland, is facing domestic violence charges. So basically, he was like arrested 2 years ago, from what I'm seeing, and that this was made public just this week, as he's now going to court. Like, so 2020, involving a woman he was dating. So, yeah, this is showing particularly around um, particularly the slowness of court cases around the pandemic, and people perhaps being more and more irate and angry around the pandemic. He was arrested and released on a $50,000 bond in August of 2020 and arraigned in October of 2020. He's pleaded not guilty, so I guess we have to say innocent until proven guilty, and now he's getting his day in court 2 years later. Now, it is worth pointing out, though, for every rich person out there who can put up a $50,000 bond, well, usually you have to do, I think, 10% of that down, so he probably had to give a bail bondsman possibly a non-refundable $5,000, maybe even if it was $500, just 1%. There's going to be so many people out there that can't afford that and that would have been in jail since August of 2020, which, yeah, that is part of the argument against the no bond bail reform movement, is that people shouldn't be thrown in jail if we're going to consider them innocent until proven guilty, unless they're rich. Yeah, it is two justice systems for people with money versus people who have no money or little money. And the fact that there's an entire industry around bail bonds is really just a shame. Now, the arguments against the bail reform movement is that, yes, some percentage of people are actually guilty and are actually violent and should be kept in jail before their court case, but the solution there is that the justice system needs to get better about identifying people who are violent and should be incarcerated pre-trial, and in general speeding up the trial system completely. One of the ways you could clean up the legal system is if they introduce universal basic income. You could get rid of a lot of the alimony and child support court cases immediately. You could very quickly say, all right, everybody's getting their needs met as far as universal basic income, therefore there's no reason for a court system to give alimony or spousal support or child support to take money from one person to the other person and create the massive amount of paperwork and trials and fights that happen around that. Certainly a lot of people would be upset about that change, but it would clear up the court system. But yeah, there's not a lot video game related to this, and you can only really assume that this is this may be just very possibly a false claim, or it could be a true claim. You can't tell one way or the other. 1 count of domestic battery with corporal injury, and 1 count of false imprisonment by menace, violence, fraud, or deceit. Like, that could be anything at all in those generic terms. It seems like it could be an S&M like sex romp that went bad, and then the girlfriend or the woman at that point remembers things differently from what they actually happened. Or it could be that he just like got in a fight with her and slapped her or punched her. Who knows? False imprisonment can be basically anything at all. Yep. And we probably will never get the details on any of these things. Anyways, so is it really worth reporting on this? Now, in general, do I think almost everybody who is in Hollywood is a scumbag? Yeah, they're all high on drugs and have massive egos, so that tends to really turn people into scumbags, and arguably maybe they weren't ever good, decent people in the first place. The whole Hollywood style tends to not build those kinds of people and that kind of personalities. But I can't also just assume all Hollywood people are guilty of everything that they're accused of, because there's also Hollywood people out there that just make up straight up false accusations. And domestic violence is just incredibly common throughout the world and underreported like crazy. And yeah, it's definitely a problem. People are violent. People are not generally good people. It's a sad statement to say on average an average person is not a good person. But that is the way averages would work. On average, an average person is an average person, and unfortunately the average is brought down quite a bit. Let's see. Moving on to more video game news. Assassin's Creed fans were hungry for a smaller scale game, says the Mirage director, following a RPG style series, Entries, Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla. It is kind of ridiculous that we have gone full circle here, and you have a game director for the Assassin's Creed series, which literally establishes itself as being these giant open world games, for him to now promote this Assassin's Creed game as being a smaller scale game and thus a better game. Now, in all fairness, Odyssey and Valhalla and Origins too, I think all have gotten far too big and turned into a very different game from what the Assassin's Creed series originally was. So they probably are way too big with their RPG elements and their desire to just keep you playing forever so that they can get you to buy microtransactions. Let's see. Apparently the director John Carpenter, which I don't know what he's been working on lately, if anything, thinks that another director is working on a Dead Space film. The Halloween maker previously said he could be interested in such a project. So this is basically just rumor mongering at this point. Yeah, almost certainly somebody is attached to making a Dead Space film. Would a Dead Space film work? I don't think so. Like, you stretch a 20-hour game, squeeze that into a 2-hour movie, it's going to be rough. It's going to have so many visual effects that it's probably going to be like the Doom rock movie, or something like that. Like, it's just, I don't think likely to be able to have the same context and the same feel as a 28-hour experience. Every time I see any of this kind of talk where they want to make a TV show or movie around a game, it seems like a dumb idea, that you're being regressive and going backwards, because I always see video games being interactive as a better medium, not than a movie. And then you're talking about making a sci-fi movie that's a niche and a horror movie that's a niche, so you have a niche on a niche. You're going to have very few viewers that would want to watch that. There have been Dead Space animated movies out there, and while they're fine, they're not particularly super high quality or anything people needed to see. So, yeah, every time I see this, I think it's just really dumb that they're so interested in making movies around games. And yeah, John Carpenter making Halloween movies. Arguably, it would be better if he did something new, but it would probably be better if he did something new that is original instead of just trying to copy and paste things or copy video games. This one's the bookmarked article, so we're not going to talk about it again. We already talked about the developer direct. Now that we go through the Gematsu articles, Kingdom the Blood has a developer commentary gameplay if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. PlayStation Plus game catalog and classics catalog lineup for January 23rd. January 2023 has been announced. We already talked about that. Skull and Bones has been delayed to early fiscal year 2023 from 2023 to 2024. And here's another screenshot that kind of makes the game look interesting. Unfortunately, I think that's all Skull and Bones really has, is that it is just a bunch of screenshots of things that look interesting. Arguably, I guess it's a different experience compared to Beyond Good and Evil 2, which we have to really admit that that game never really was in development, or it is in some massive development hell now, because we have not seen anything around Beyond Good and Evil 2 in years. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's kind of at a similar level of development where they've made some advertisements and promotion images and don't have a actual finalized product or idea. At a certain point, maybe game developers around Beyond Good and Evil 2 and Skull and Bones should do just like what No More Heroes 1 did, which is just shovel out there a game that's mediocre in story or has no story and just not that good in gameplay mechanics. Just put something out and be done with it so that you could work on the sequel. Both a theoretical Beyond Good and Evil 3 and Skull and Bones 2 could be in development right now instead. Wanted Dead Combat Explain trailer is available. And yeah, in comparison, this game was announced only a short time ago and doesn't have any real major, let's see, what would the right word be, expectations built around it. So by not having set the expectations high, a game like this could just be put out, and this may not be too much of a real experience, but fast enough it may come out fast enough that you're really not expecting too much of an experience. Obviously, looking at this, I'm expecting guns and samurai playing and running around and killing people with guns and samurai playing. I don't expect any major story. I don't expect it to be a giant MMO game. I don't expect it to last for 10 years, 5 years that I'd play it. They've shown me some RPG elements here, but not a massive amount of RPG elements. So this trailer is just getting me interested in this game without promising the world, where Skull and Bones kind of promised a world. Dead Space remake launch trailer. Let's see, have I seen this trailer? Infirmature. Everything's coming out as Infirmature, and yet Infirmature, if anything, is just still not really what you would consider Infirmature. Alright, well, looking at the remake here, it definitely feels like some of the face models have changed on the characters, and it does kind of feel like the environment models maybe are trying to be a little bit bigger, more open world, less claustrophobic. Maybe that's a mistake, maybe that's not. Looking at this trailer though, it's really just kind of showing you the exact same game as Dead Space 1, which I guess that's fine. I don't feel like the face model on the girlfriend is particularly good though. Her face is fatter than what I think she would have looked like. I mean, I recently played Dead Space 1, and I never got the face on the girlfriend that it was kind of like a plump face, or that she looked old and haggard. Like, It really is a mom face, a school teacher face, just like this is a 50-year-old woman face. And we may very well be having a case where this is just Horizon Zero Dawn or Horizon 2, whatever the sequel was, where there's this weird push to have fatter / more realistic faces on women, just uglier faces. Like we've gone from the clean faces mod of like Skyrim where people are preferring not to. Let's see if we can pause this. There. Oh man, this is gonna be difficult, particularly blurred out. There we go. Like we've gone from people putting in mods just to see faces clean instead of dirty in Skyrim to we're gonna have to start seeing mods to see the faces of these animated characters as the more idealistic, skinny, arguably not human, even skinny faces. There are skinny faced people out there though. But yeah, this immediately does not strike me as the same character, and a lot of the face mods felt that way. And this immediately doesn't strike me as somebody who would have been a girlfriend to Isaac, or somebody that you'd actually want to protect or fall in love with as the player as much. It's just a lot of plumpness here, a lot of raggedness here, a lot of like rough hair. Now, maybe this is an early pass, but it's a trailer, so you can't really excuse it for that. And you see this face arguably more than any other face in the game, even Isaac's. So they really needed to get this face done well. Like the monsters could be fairly drastically different. Most of the other characters in the game could have completely different character models. But the girlfriend kind of needed to look like the girlfriend. Isaac kind of needs to look like Isaac. The actual gameplay, it would be nice if it was improved and changed around a bit, but I wouldn't be surprised if it isn't changed that much. In that trailer, you're not really seeing new regions, new areas, new abilities. Arguably, it may very well be that it is just a very slight remaster of a game to replace the current remaster port of Dead Space 1, because the current remastered port of Dead Space 1 is buggy and you have to turn on vertical sync or turn off vertical sync to get through the first door in the first level. Moving on, Nexon announces a Project DW Dungeons and Fighter open world action RPG for consoles and PC on mobile. Yep. Miracle Snack Shop is coming to the PS4 on January 26th. This is another one of these Japanese games that is only coming to the PS4. It's a visual novel, so it doesn't really probably need the power of a PlayStation 5, which arguably that might be a lot of the problem as far as game sales on the PlayStation 5 in general, is that there are very few games that actually do need the power of the PlayStation 5 and could easily do 1080p on the PS4. Seems like this is a bunch of anime girls running a snack shop as a visual novel. A SD, SD standing for Super Deformed, which is an art style that's not been used very much in the past 5 to 10 years. But SD Shin Kamen Rider Rumble debut trailer, details and screenshots, English version announced for Asia in general. So super deformed is when they are basically chibi. Like at this point, I'm not sure that there is much of a difference between a super deformed and chibi, or if chibi really has just taken over as the description. Um, Perhaps maybe there's a slight difference in the animation style in that this super deformed character has actual legs, where a chibi character might just have floating feet, and he has actual arms, where a chibi character might barely have arms at all. Maybe the head is a little bit bigger on the chibi character. Kamen Rider in that format doesn't look like much, and the actual game is just a side-scrolling beat-em-up game, so by making it super deformed in art style and having all the other enemies a super deformed art style, it gives them more room to have more enemies on screen for a bigger beat-em-up, and you can certainly see that in all the numbers and flashing effects happening here. Kamen Rider is an old Japanese show, superhero Sentai show. I think Kamen Rider mostly fights enemies, like big enemies instead of minions, though, like monsters of the week type characters, very much like a Power Ranger thing. But this screenshots seems to imply it's going to focus more on the minions fighting. A Chinese sailing simulation RPG called Sailing Era is now available for PC, and it's coming to PlayStation and Switch this summer. What makes it a Chinese sailing simulator? Well, first look here, you can see there's a massive amount of menus that, like a lot of Chinese games, maybe it is set in China. Looking at some of the characters, at least this is somewhat varied in the type of narrative and story they'd be telling. And if anything, I would say China does have kind of a history of a lot of sailing commerce over its past. So there could be a story to tell around that, certainly. At one time, the myth is there was more Chinese pirates in charge of more of China than the people on the landmass of China. Let's see. Colopool announces a free-to-play 3D action RPG called Volzic Monsters and Lands Unknown for PCIS and iOS and Android. This looks like this is a kind of like Genshin Impact, Monster Rancher, Monster Hunter game. I'm gonna stand up for a second and adjust my cushions on my chair. 1 second. There we go. Sorry about that. So yeah, a mobile phone game that's a little bit more Monster Rancher, Pokemon-esque. Noticeably, it doesn't feel super Pokemon from the screenshots. Seems like it is limited to dragon type monsters, and you're not just getting totally new type creatures. The art style and character design here seems to be somewhat limited. I wouldn't be surprised if there aren't a wild amount of them. Although also being a mobile game, it certainly could start with a small collection of monsters and add more. Mobile Suit Gundam Battle Operations 2 PC network test has been set for January 16th through the 18th. The full release is due out in early 2023. I don't know if this is... I guess anybody can participate via the Steam page, so it's not particularly excluding itself to just a Japanese region. If I recall correctly, one of the skins that was like a limited edition skin for Genshin Impact, no, I think it actually was for Arknights, has been exclusive. Yeah, it was for Arknights. It's been made exclusive to Japan only, so the other Asian regions with other Asian players are being excluded, and that's immediately caused a controversy. And I definitely have seen that happen in mobile games. It never goes down well, obviously. People are not happy when it's exclusive. If anything, people might be okay with it being exclusive for an Asian mobile game to exclude it from the Western world. Often there are like skimpy bikini outfits that are exclusive to Asian countries only, but to say Japan only is a little weird. Moving on, Astrolab Games is going to publish a Kafka-esque satirical puzzle RPG called Moth Qubit for PC. Using Kafka-esque as a descriptor, I think, is not helpful. Pretty much anytime anybody says Kafka-esque, you then have to follow up with what do you mean by that, because most people, I don't think, have any general agreement on what that means or any understanding whatsoever around what that means. Looking at the screenshots, is Kafka-esque because it's black and white? Is Kafka-esque because it's got a moth in it? Is it Kafka-esque because it has eyes floating around in the background? See, if I was to describe this as just surreal, at least that's a general description people can agree on, in that it's not real feeling in its depiction. Is this Kafka-esque because of its color palette? Like, yeah. Making direct references to specific artists is only possibly helpful if you're in an art class or talking amongst a group of people who have taken a lot of art history and understand what you're talking about. It could be Kafka-esque based on something as far as the audio or the story too, and have nothing to do with the visuals. Moving on, Fairy Tale Kingdom City Builder Fabledom has been announced for PC, which I guess the question is, how much different is a city builder if it just has a fairy tale theme to it? Generally, looking at these screenshots, it still seems like it's pretty much just kind of a city builder, like most other city builders, set in the like pre-industrial, medieval, feudal type era. Let's see, we already talked about Seasonal Letter to the Future with its story, trailer, and screenshots. Komatsu has the Famitsu sales updated, which for software sales this week we have Nintendo Switch games taking up the top 5 spots, and then Gran Turismo 7 for the PlayStation 5 taking up the 6th spot, and then Nintendo Switch games taking up all the other spots. And arguably, maybe the reason why Gran Turismo 7 even makes it to the charts is because it's being published directly by Sony Interactive Entertainment, and so it's a first-party title, whereas Pokemon Company you would probably consider a first-party title for Nintendo, but then you get Dragon Quest taking up the 5th spot from Square Enix, and then Microsoft with Minecraft taking up the 7th spot, then Konami, than Nintendo and Nintendo. So as far as third-party support and third-party development, the sales clearly, for this week at least, are going to Nintendo Switch. Hardware-wise, though, we have twice as many OLED models sold this week compared to PlayStation 5s, and a million plus more, 1,600,000 about more units for just the OLED model. Whereas if you started to add the Switch and the Switch Lights together, you get even higher numbers and higher overall sales by far. And adding the PlayStation 5 Digital Edition to the PlayStation 5 lifetime wise, or even this week, does not account for that. Even adding the PlayStation 4 together with the PlayStation 5 and Digital Edition of PlayStation 5 doesn't account for that. Now, noticeably, the Xbox Series S and Series X have dropped very low in the charts, probably because PlayStation 5s are finally available to be purchased. For a while there, when you couldn't get a PlayStation 5, you were seeing Japanese people actually buy the Xbox Series X. They tended not to get the Series S. So the fact that we're seeing more Series S sales now probably means this is their second console or third console purchases that are happening. And generally these numbers are always kind of small anyways. And then the updated version of the list that goes further just continues to compound the division between Nintendo Switch games and PlayStation games in Japan, really highlighting how Japan has just become 100% a Nintendo Switch playing console region and nothing else. That they are either going to mobile or PC for their second consoles, or they're not doing anything else at all. There is a side story here that I don't think is going to get reported on, but during a recent live stream, the Final Fantasy 16 producer, let's see, what's his name? Naoki Yoshida, Yoshi-P being a nickname, seemed to have a drunken outburst, is what they're describing it as, in that he said nobody said anything about Final Fantasy 16 coming to PC. The full quote, it went something along the lines of, I'm tired of people just assuming that, and this is in Japanese being translated, so it's not a real quote anyways, but he said something along the lines of he's tired of people assuming that Final Fantasy 16 would just get a PC 6 months later, just buy a PlayStation 5 already. So, yeah, very possible there that the Final Fantasy 16 is not coming to PC. Which, okay, that'll probably lose them some sales, but also that's certainly not the way to say that, and it implies that he has too strong of feelings about it not coming to PlayStation. Now, inherently, game developers probably do have attitudes like that, and they kind of have a reason to have attitudes like that too, because it hurts their bonuses and the chances of them getting a sequel. Although in the case of Final Fantasy games, there will always be another Final Fantasy game, but maybe not made by the same person. But if you're not getting those sales in that first 6 months launch window, then you're not really getting credit for the game. And that's a bad problem with the way the game industry works, is that people are just not getting bonuses, and they're not getting rewarded for games that have long tails or that get sales outside of that 6-month initial launch window. But certainly you're gonna not get anybody convinced to buy Final Fantasy 16 by a drunken outburst that says we're not bringing it to PC. That just creates negative associations and negative feelings. The way that was phrased, and honestly, Final Fantasy is not in a position where it can lose audience because it's already losing more audience. Meanwhile, you also have the comparison of, well, Final Fantasy VII Remake is on PC, so we can just wait for that. And plenty of the other Final Fantasy games are on PC, and plenty of other games are on PC in general, so they can skip 16 fairly easily. Let's move on with the news. Let's see. A game called Iki Unite launches February 15th on PC. Speaking of PC games, like, increasingly following Gamatsu as my news source of these are Japanese press releases for games that tend to be Japanese centric. More and more games are coming out on PC. For Japanese centric games are coming out on PC as much as they are coming out on consoles. Of course, something like Undisputed launching in early access on PC on January 31st would not be one that I'd particularly count, because this obviously is a boxing game from PlayOn, which I'm not sure if that's a Japanese company as a publisher. This game, Undisputed as a boxing game, looks interesting, but I would hardly call this a Japanese game built by a Japanese company for a Japanese audience. This, in part, looks like it very much might be closer to like an arcade-style wrestling game or an actual simulation of boxing than anything like Punch-Out, which I'd give that a chance, but my personal desire would be to have a game like Punch-Out. Noticeably, in that trailer, I didn't see any like recognizable boxers, but I wouldn't really recognize boxers. If you were going to make a Japanese boxing game, I would think it would probably be like a Japanese kickboxing game more than just like boxing, or at least you would expect there to be Japanese looking people. I don't know if boxing just actually is even popular or done at all in Japan. Like, I've never seen it happen. I know that there's wrestling, certainly, and I know that there's sumo, and I know that there is like karate demonstrations and competitions there, but just pugilism as a sport may not exist at all in Japan, or may exist as one of many small hobbies that happen in Japan that are incredibly insular, where there's 200-300 people at most that actually are part of the hobby and the public is not welcome. I've heard of those kinds of hobbies happening. Moving on, Blade Assault for the PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch launches March 31st. So that's basically everything except for PC. In this case, we don't have any screenshots to look at that. Rhythm Sprout launches February 1st, which I assume that this is a rhythm game, and I really don't have time to look at every single trailer. This rhythm game might not be too off from something like, what was the name of that game that came out on the PlayStation 2 that people really liked? There was a rapping game, Parappa the Rapper, I think was the name of it. Yeah. For the popularity of rhythm games, it's surprising that there hasn't been a rhythm game where when you match the beats, you start rapping. I know that there is one game that's something like that. That came out maybe a year or two ago and got some praise, but you would think that there'd be a lot of those. A game called Shoulders of Giants launches January 26th. It's a sci-fi rogue-like action-adventure game. It's for the PC, Xbox One, and Xbox Series, noticeably skipping the PlayStation. And it is an Epic Game Store exclusive. I guess we're back to the point now where we're starting to get actual announcements, which is going to make streams longer. And any suggestions to speed up how this goes would be greatly appreciated, but the caveat around that is that I've got to figure out a way to speed out things without actually cutting out much of anything. If I was going to cut out anything, I'd cut out the Yu-Gi-Oh stuff, and that's the stuff people seem to want to actually watch, if anything. Puzzle Bobble Every Bubble includes Puzzle Bobble versus Space Invaders mode, which I guess that's a surprise announcement. This is a Switch-only game. My teen romantic comedy Snafu Climax game launches April 27th in Japan for the PS4 in Japan and Switch. This is the third My Teen romantic comedy Snafu visual novel game. We can look at the screenshots here. Very colorful screenshots they've got showing here. I assume this is gonna lean more into the comedy more than any kind of like drama aspects. And it seems like it's coming with a OVA. I guess maybe they don't use OAVs anymore. Original video animation versus original anime video or original animated video. Yeah, if you get the limited edition, you get they have a trailer. Maybe that is sold separately though. Now, noticeably, it would be interesting to check to see if this is on Steam. So I'm going to leave this article open and see if any of these games are available on Steam, any of the two previous games. Because, yeah, you definitely do have anime girls here and anime guys in school outfits, and Steam seems to have some problem with any romantic story taking place in these high school / college outfits that they love to use in animated series. This Gaia has yet another trailer. They are putting out 1 or 2 trailers every couple of days, it feels like. Fatal Frame Mask of the Lunar Eclipse for basically everything has a developer commentary gameplay available to watch, I guess. This game is not out yet, I don't think. It would be kind of weird to announce. Yeah, it's coming out worldwide on March 9th, including Steam, but it is also a remake of a Wii exclusive to Japan, a Wii game exclusive to Japan that came out in 2008. So it's a remaster, and that would explain why there's some roughness on the visuals. And I guess that might also explain why you would do a developer commentary. Like, very rarely do you have an opportunity to do a developer commentary on video games, and it would be interesting if more of that did happen. If I was going to make a video game company and be a publisher, I could see trying to get some of these older games and making tool-assisted speedrun versions of the game that just turn them into easy games with no interaction, or try to edit out boring grind parts of old games and make abridged versions. And on top of that, I could see if you had something that was automated and more of a tool-assisted speedrun game, that you could have developers come back and make some comments on there. Although I'm not sure they really have anything that interesting to say. And like, game developers really don't have that much free time or that much extra to say around games, and they don't have an experience of making developer commentaries anyways. Almost always, when you do get a game that has a developer commentary, you have to get the entire team on board to talk about it, and you get just a few comments every now and then. Even in movies, a lot of times developer commentaries are pretty lackluster. Um, but when I say making tool assisted speedruns too, I also want to point out I don't mean making something that would just speedrun the game as fast as possible. The phrase that I'm using is actually wrong. I should say more like tool assisted cool runs, taking the best inputs from a player to show this is a cool way in which the game could have been played if you were actually playing it, or this is how you would beat a boss on the first time without without dying and having to start all over again. That was particularly a problem when I was playing No More Heroes, is that the second to last enemy, Bad Girl is her name, was, particularly on PC where I think the game is poorly ported and broken, it was just incredibly difficult to defeat her, and I spent 4 to 5 hours trying to defeat her, dying over and over again. So if I had a tool assisted cool run that beat her on the first try, that would have been nice. Now, as it were, what would define a cool run? You probably want to see every attack that you can show while in the game. In particular, in Bad Girl, she has, like, in No More Heroes, she has an instant kill attack, so you would want to be able to show that and then edit that out and make that like a blooper at the end of the game of a cool run. So move entire animations into a different place that wouldn't be there during the game. You'd want to show her attack hitting and doing some amount of damage each time, so maybe cheat to give more health to the player. You'd want the player to be able to do combos and attacks at least once to really just show off as much of the game as you actually might see if you were playing the game, while getting rid of the repetition. So if I'm hitting X 5 times in a game and it's just doing the same punching animation, you don't need, in a cool run, which is this made up concept I'm making up off the top of my head, you wouldn't need to show somebody punching 5 times. Instead, you'd show them just punching once and maybe causing a lot more damage than normal, or you would see them do other cool combos. And depending on the game, that works fairly well, or that would work fairly well or fairly awful. Let's see. Do I have anything else more to say about Fatal Frame? No. I am kind of hyped about this game, but I'll have to remind myself whether this was the game that was kind of the prequel game to the Fatal Frame series, or if we are in a situation where not all the Fatal Frame games are on PC. Interestingly, too, this is partly a Grasshopper Manufacture game, and playing Project Zero, or Fatal Frame, whatever it's called, Mask of the Lunar Eclipse, if it is a Grasshopper Manufacturing game, may give me some hint as to whether Suda51 is the crazy person at Grasshopper Manufacturing that made Killer 7 and No More Heroes and made them so weird, or whether it is just in general that's the thing Grasshopper Manufacturer does. Yeah. They for the past couple of months have been talking exclusively about Fatal Frame as far as press releases. Although Hotel Barcelona and Death Game hotels, I guess, are still being rumored, and No More Heroes 3 is being talked about. Let's see. Did No More Heroes 3 even ever come to PC 5 months ago? Doesn't seem like it did. So, I'm not even sure No More Heroes 2. No, it does say it's coming to PC. It's also, I guess, worth pointing out that a year ago, NetEase acquired Grasshopper Manufacturer, so whatever they're doing now may very well be different than what they were doing years ago. No More Heroes 2 Desperate Struggle coming to PC on January 9th, so it did come to PC a year ago. Travis Strikes Again, I think, is pretty much just going to be forgotten about, though. And then they did re-release the Silver 2425. Let's see, 2 years ago. Let It Die also playing some role there. Well, No More Heroes 3 was announced. Yeah, Suda51 and Swery65 are supposed to be working on Hotel Barcelona, but that nothing has come about that. And that was 3 years ago that they were talking about. Yeah, Travis Strikes Again came out 3 years ago, and I wouldn't mind looking at it on Steam, but I almost certainly wouldn't bother actually playing it. Anyways, I'm kind of rambling here. Let's move on. Okay, so we've got some games on Steam. I did give some thought here as far as just would there be a better way to do this? I thought maybe there was a different follow list that you could make, or a different wish list you could make to put adult content on here. Let's see. No. But there isn't. There is only ignore, default, or played on a different platform. It would be nice if I could have a separate follow list, because then I could put adult games on that separate follow list. I did definitely get, here's an adult game this Friday. We're definitely going to see adult games since it is Friday. Oedo trigger? OEDO trigger? Interesting. So it's an asset flip first person shooter game by the looks of it. It looks like I can just show everything here. We're shooting anime girls in large groups with semi-assault rifles. They seem to all be in Shrine Maiden type outfits and things like that. Visuals do not look particularly good. At some points they seem to sit on you, sit on your face. But then you see also, here's a non-widescreen screenshot of what looks like just like a completely different game. And then you've got some widescreen screenshots. They're calling it a dating sim. I don't even know where you'd get the dating sim from that. And they're calling them kimono girls, although like maybe the Shrine Maiden outfits they're wearing are kimonos, but there's definitely some other outfits here that I don't think I would 100% say are just kimonos. And the girls in their underwear, wearing underwear in a kimono is not traditional at all in the first place, but the girls in the lingerie, underwear, bra, and panties are definitely not kimonos. Oedo Trigger is $21.24. It says it supports English, Chinese, and Japanese. I would lean towards it probably being a Western game developer trying to appeal to the East, but it could easily be a Chinese developer or a Japanese developer. But yeah, as part of trying to improve, I was thinking if there was a way I could run my macro twice and pull up the adult games and put them in a section. That certainly would be helpful if I manually bundled all the adult games together in one big block. That way I could pull attention away from the web peak like that first, then talk about the adult games without any risk of a half-second flash. Inherently, I am just running a big risk here as far as like I'm waiting for a point where I might have a point where I'd get into the YouTube partner program and then they look at my channel and say, nope, we're gonna say no because of the fact that you're talking about adult games. I think I'm gonna say no to Bing and Wonderland. Or like I did get in the YouTube partner program, so then my videos would be monetized and then I start to see them demonetized. At a certain point, I should be getting notifications when a video would not be eligible for monetization, even if I'm not in the partner program. But maybe they stopped doing that. But also, it's very possible that they're just not running their automated algorithm particularly at a high level, since the channel's not monetized in the first place. I'll give this a chance. There might be something there to it. Another Airy game. This is about the 20th of these Airy games. And I really just want to ignore the developer. Let's see. Is there a way to ignore the developer? I don't think you can in this way. But yeah, this developer has a massive amount of games, most of which are just kind of copy and pastes of the exact same thing, flooding Steam. But he's not doing it at such a high level that he's getting caught, if anybody ever gets caught for flooding Steam. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think there really is a way to run the macro twice. What I would have to do is I'd have to run it once with adult content and once without adult content, and then run it a second time after changing all the settings without adult content, and see if perhaps everything would just line up to move all of the Firefox tabs that were not adult content into a different direction, either to the left or the right of them. It wouldn't. I'd have to make another web page being open to act as kind of a dividing line. Is this an adult game? $9.99. English Chinese. Somebody asked me on one of the YouTube shorts, or snidely remarked, I guess is how you might say, the YouTube shorts, one of the titles is check out this PC game, and they said snidely, let me guess you made it. And I'm like, I thought I put in the description that this was just a random curation of games that had come out on Steam, and I have no affiliation with them at all. So yeah, I took it as potentially being kind of aggressive, but you know what? I shouldn't. I should just assume everything when you see it in writing is being done as nicely or said as nicely as possible, and respond back 2 times as nice as the way someone's talking to you, and reduce the potential aggressionness to it. So I just answered directly, which is the right answer, is to say, nope, this is just a curation of games. They're not even games I would 100% suggest. A lot of these games that I'm making YouTube shorts on, I'm just saying, check it out. Just look, see if it might interest you. Like this game, On My Own, a hot isekai adventure, might interest some people, but probably not that many that I would think that I should curate it and make a YouTube short around it, because it's not actually an adult game. It doesn't have any actual nudity through. There's a walkthrough they're selling for $5.39, which is crazy. And then there is a free uncensored patch for what is effectively just a poorly animated RPG Maker type game. But yeah, particularly when I'm making these YouTube shorts and deciding if they look good enough or interesting enough to deserve a short, I am looking at them right as they first are being released. So the 2 or 3 months it might take for the YouTube short to actually air means that a lot more people could have played the game, a lot more people could have reviewed the game, and the game potentially could just change. This Under Dungeon, I don't think is detailed enough. With its black and white art style here, you just have to have a lot of other kinds of detail because you're losing color. And I just don't think that's there. This one screenshot here almost gets detailed enough, but it's also zoomed in so much that it's still not quite there. And then Kung Fu School here is definitely not detailed enough. Fast-paced tactics or Walk with the Living 2. I guess the name of the game is Walk with the Living 2. I guess the question is there a Walk with the Living 1? I don't think that there's... Looks like a visual novel. You have a free game here that came out January 20th last year. Yeah, in a lot of ways it seems like it's very possibly the exact same story or the exact same game, just with maybe slightly better visuals this time. It's still a square ratio, though. Not quite enough polish there for this to deserve a follow or a short. Hike Island. I'll give it a chance. I've also lowered my standards quite a bit for YouTube Shorts. But I don't particularly need to have very high standards for YouTube Shorts either. They are literally 1 minute videos that people are supposed to just very quickly look at them. Honestly, I usually spend more than a minute looking at a specific game. So by pulling it down to a minute, that I'm saving people time and hopefully I'm helping people make better decisions. Alright, this next game is an adult game called Umi-chan 2 Scoops, which is flat 2D, colorful characters, but I would say not particularly done in a way that I would say a Japanese animator has made them. There's a lot of bikini laden ladies there. I guess for reference, let's just very quickly show this art style here, and it's a lot of giant breasts and just kind of lacking in detail, somewhat smaller eyes art styles. You do have kind of this colorful art style. It is aping and copying anime, but it's not doing a particularly good job. It seems like it may be straight up just a dating visual novel with no other gameplay mechanic. It's selling for $3.59 and it supports English only. So I would say it's lacking polish, certainly, but it's at least trying something here. There is, I think, a real story there and a real effort to have a story there instead of just like a slide puzzle game. Cannibal Abduction visually is just a little too low polygon for my liking. Criminal Expert is a full motion video, and basically any full motion video is probably going to get a short unless it just looks absolutely awful, because that's going to be hard to determine whether it's good or not. it's going to heavily rely on this story, and I won't know the story. Spirits Creek. I think I'll give this one a chance because it does look like there's some interesting monsters here. It does seem like we may start to get more horror games back. It's not like we're anywhere close to Halloween or anything. Why we'd get more horror? Today is, I guess, technically Friday the 13th, so maybe some people were trying to release on Friday the 13th, like that's a big holiday when it really isn't. This is a nicely animated kind of asset flip horror game. Definitely shows that the asset flips visually are getting better and better. You just have monsters out there in front of the screen. But I'd still say no with that, no to that. Shake Hands is a Sokoban box pushing game with maybe a variety on it. So that's doing something slightly different in that you're going in two different directions instead of just one. Zombie Admin. I don't think there's enough there to make me interested in that. Yeah, I'll give it a short though. Like, again, very, very low standards for the YouTube shorts. It's so crazy that now increasingly I'm spending so much of my channel making YouTube shorts, and that is somewhat helping me. Although it's not, it's kind of a trap too on YouTube, the way they've set it up, because if you get a bunch of views from YouTube shorts, it makes you feel good, but it doesn't really do anything for you, because you need like 10 million views or a ton of watch hours to be monetized on top of having 1,000 subscribers. Now, arguably, if you didn't need the 1,000 subscribers, it would be a much more reasonable requirement. But yeah, getting people to subscribe to your channel for your YouTube shorts and you get 1,000 subscribers, unless each one of them is watching your every single video like 10,000 times each. No, like not 10,000 times each, but a massive amount of times. I can't do the math in my head at the moment. You're really not getting anywhere with it, and you definitely aren't getting watch time, because they can only be a minute hours and minute long. This will make a YouTube short on. And I haven't seen anything at all that implies getting people to watch the YouTube shorts is pushing them to watch my pre-recorded footage, which my pre-recorded footage is just getting longer and longer now. 2-3 hour episodes becoming fairly common. Do we really need a game that's specifically Finnish army? I mean, this just kind of looks like any other army, close enough to any other army, and it doesn't look good on top of that. It's interesting that this is the second Wolfenstein style clone game I've seen today. So yeah, you could be a super successful, or feel like you're a super successful YouTube short creator on YouTube and not get monetized, or get incredibly small amounts of income from the amount of views you're getting. Or you can, let's see, I bet this is an adult game. Well, it's not in the adult section, but it does have mature content saying that there is sexual content in it. Pet Dragon Girl. Let's see. Seems to be the same Pet Dragon Girl, mostly focused here on the game. Just this one character, and I guess you probably get to see her in different outfits and maybe naked. Seems like it's a tile-based puzzle game, and that's pretty much it. Doesn't seem like there's a lot there. 84 cents, so not asking a lot. Claims to support a ton of languages, but noticeably says it has sexual content in the mature content description, but the mature content description is not at the top, and it's not in the adult section. Otherwise there would be a bar here. So I'd say no to that. Yeah. What I definitely wouldn't want to do, as I continue to ramble here, furry sex 2 is going to be anthropomorphic furries, animal girls. Not really even furries. Furries are humans in fursuits, as I understand it. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Where anthropomorphic animals that have human-like features would still be kind of animals and not furries. But maybe the term is inclusive enough to include both. Well, every screenshot on this game, or half of the screenshots here, are just single furry creatures in states of undress or states of nudity, and that seems to be about it. It just seems to be a collection of images. It says it's a puzzle game or a memory game in the description. It's $1.19. It's English only. It's fine, I guess, depending on how many images are actually in it, but I definitely don't think it's probably worth actually buying. And it definitely doesn't feel like it's an actual game worth playing. Yeah, anyways, what I was saying is I don't want to do this, but it does kind of feel like a lot of people might find themselves getting thousands of subscribers through YouTube Shorts and then having to try and pivot those subscribers to YouTube Shorts over to watching long form content to get people to watch their old content. I think we could say, I'm gonna give this a chance actually. You Are the Dinner. Like, pivot them to longer form content for the watch time, or pivot them to longer form content to just actually see content that is more interesting. The YouTube Shorts concept alone don't feel like they work in a vacuum as a creative medium. Cider Bunny says he's back. I didn't. Okay, I guess I'll just say okay to that. But yeah, I just don't think that TikTok style creators are going to come to YouTube and be able to just constantly make TikToks and succeed exclusively on making TikToks. I don't think the entirety of YouTube is going to pivot in that way. This Woo Loop game is an interesting concept. It's probably something that would be better to be done in the real world, but it is interesting to see a digital form of something that is really more about arts and crafts, hands-on process. This could be also very annoying if you're not into it, but by it being digital, it's telling you directly which loops to do, so you could probably follow this along in the real world if you wanted to. Like, I don't know if this is even really a thing people sell for kids. It looks like something that kids might play with. I'd have to investigate that more. But yeah, I guess the best thing I could do is I just have to continue to think and continue to try to evolve and grow on my channel to say, what can I do with my pre-recorded footage to make it appeal, or to try to make it appeal more to people who potentially subscribe to my channel looking at the YouTube Shorts, or are they just a completely different audience? It's very possible that they are just a completely different audience and that they will never want to watch any of the pre-recorded footage. But maybe that works well too. Maybe having 1,000 subscribers that like my YouTube Shorts will get my pre-recorded footage recommended to other people who might enjoy it better. Well, that was the last of the games that came out on Steam in the past couple days, so let's go through the GameDeveloper.com articles and then wrap up the stream. Seems like GameDeveloper.com's has an update here saying his attorney T. Edward Wellborn, nice to name the attorney at least, said that Squanch Games chief exec intends to clear his name and describes the media coverage of the situation as inaccurate. It's hard to overstate how inaccurate the recent media coverage of the situation has been. To be clear, not only is Justin innocent, but we also have every expectation that the matter is on course to be dismissed once the district attorney officer has completed its methodical review of the evidence. We look forward to clearing Justin's name and helping him move forward as swiftly as possible. So yeah, they're denying everything. Yeah, and I guess I have nothing else to say there. GameDeveloper.com has that same article saying that there's a report saying Nvidia and Google contacted the FTC with concerns over the Microsoft Activision Blizzard deal. Let's see. Sony has brought in former Apple exec to oversee its digital business. The PlayStation maker has named Ben King as the new senior VP of direct-to-consumer. I guess direct-to-consumer everything. Feels like there should be another word after that. I guess the question to ask yourself is, do you think Apple has done good as far as direct-to-consumer advertisement, promotion, production of products at Apple? I mean, iTunes was a massive success many years ago, but I don't know if iTunes is a massive success now. And the iOS App Store, I don't know if that's particularly well designed. I don't think a lot of people actually go to the App Store and get a bunch of new apps. I think mostly Apple people use the built-in apps that are installed into the phone on day one by Apple. Does the Apple TV promote good TV to watch and stream? I don't think it does. Yeah, for what little I've used of it. I barely used it. So I don't know. So if anything, this may very well be a case where you have a California person who is a crony of some other California people at Sony of California, and he's gotten a job because he's been able to sell himself as being a rainmaker type personality, when maybe he really hasn't made that much rain. Maybe there should be somebody more skilled hired here. Benefit of the doubt, though, I guess we give Ben King a benefit of the doubt, and PlayStation honestly couldn't do much worse than it already is, so if they can improve the PlayStation Store even a little bit, that would be great. The PlayStation Store in particular needs to probably just be massively overhauled, and arguably the PlayStation themes and visuals and everything should just have a whole refresh and update. The XMB cross media bar concept probably needs to be rethought and changed up just for something fresh and something different. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. GDC has 30 years of Kirby in a Kirby in the Forgotten Land speech coverage here. If you go to GDC, you could follow the speech. Otherwise, this is just an announcement for GDC, which is owned by the same parent company as GameDeveloper.com. Let's see. Apparently, NetEase's Shanghai team is going to disband post the Blizzard breakup, with Blizzard and NetEase calling it quits. The NetEase studio in charge of operating Blizzard games in China will cease to exist. Yeah. Blizzard, because China requires all foreign companies to work with local Chinese companies, NetEase was in charge of Blizzard games being run in China, and I'm not sure that many Blizzard games were ever even approved for play amongst the censorship in China. Diablo Immortal may very well have been the only one, and now they're disbanding and going out of business, which I guess isn't that big of a surprise. Yeah, and I'll just leave it at that. Let's see. Wizards of the Coast has responded to the Dungeons & Dragons OGL controversy. A week later, Wizards of the Coast speaks on the changes it originally planned to make for the Dungeons & Dragons license. As I skim this, I think what they are basically trying to say is, oh, we've heard your feedback, and it's not as bad as you seem, or we're going to try and do things differently. They're trying to appease the angry mob at this point, and I'm not sure that anybody bought it. But yeah, it seems like it's a lot of platitudes and talk as I'm skimming right now, and a probably hollow apology, but the hate mob is still pretty much unhappy with Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, and Dungeons and Dragons by connection. I believe there's been somebody that's put out a new kind of open source rule set in direct comparison to replace as far as the Dungeons and Dragons things. I don't know if they've put out this new OGL open gaming license officially yet either, or if they're still just kind of talking about putting out it or thinking about putting it out, this new version of the OGL. But it definitely didn't seem like it was even legal as far as what they were trying to claim. Well, not that they may not get away with it anyways. But yeah, this very possibly is the one thing that would kill Dungeons and Dragons, which you would have thought would have been unkillable, that there would always just be people who would want to play Dungeons and Dragons. But they very much may have just pissed off and burned away the last of the hardcore fans, or enough of the last of the hardcore fans who were liking to play some version of Dungeons and Dragons. I bet a lot of Dungeons and Dragons fans are playing like version rule set 1, rule set 2, rule set 3, and that Hasbro has put out 4 or 5, 6 versions of rule sets that people really just don't enjoy. But yeah, if there's a new like rule set that's not Dungeons and Dragons, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people move to that. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people just kind of give up on Dungeons and Dragons anyways, because it takes a lot of love and a lot of commitment to play Dungeons and Dragons anyways, and we may see it become such an incredibly small product that people stop talking about it. Although it does have that cultural touchstone, and Dungeons and Dragons will probably always have that. But in a lot of ways, like Magic the Gathering is kind of the same, is that Magic the Gathering probably was great in the first series and the second series, or Ice Age, or like first few years of Magic the Gathering was probably great. Right now, it's probably not as good, and people aren't happy with Magic the Gathering either, being based off Dungeons and Dragons and being incredibly crazy and greedy. In part, a major part of this is just Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast being incredibly greedy, and just they've messed over their audience so much that it could go away completely, or it could just stay at very small numbers. Marvel and DC Comics, definitely similar situations where the actual comic book fans are very few and not treated well. And if it weren't for the fact that there was Marvel movies owned by Disney and Marvel wasn't owned by Disney, Marvel would be an incredibly small company, and Warner Brothers owning DC, same thing. And at least in the comic book situation, there isn't as much of a commitment to time-wise, at least, to own comic books and read comic books. Whereas in Dungeons and Dragons, you have to have friends, and they have to come over and play for hours and hours and hours. And if there's any anger coming around the creators of that game, why would you do that? Moving on, the Goose Goose Duck game has reached 800,000 concurrent players, which I guess that's a big number. Yeah, that definitely is a big number. I don't know if it's a free-to-play game or not. So it may not be that much of sales. It's basically, I guess, the new Among Us. And if I was really smart, I would probably try and play a game like this quickly while it still is somewhat popular as a content creator. Oh, here's the competitor story. Pathfinder publisher Paizo is going to introduce a new system-neutral open RPG license. The company says the new license will be open, perpetual, and irrevocable, which perpetual pretty much probably would cover irrevocable, but saying both definitely is better than only saying one. This is where the first fight will certainly happen, though, is if this publisher for a Pathfinder, Starfinder, tabletop RPG series puts out a open RPG license, that there still is a chance that playing a Pathfinder or Starfinder game feels very different than playing a Dungeons and Dragons game, or that Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast will claim that certain gameplay mechanics are copyrighted and owned by them and them exclusively. So it might be a case that Pathfinder and Starfinder games allow for orcs to exist, but maybe Dungeons and Dragons claims they own goblins, and then there might be like some kind of three-way legal fight if you tried to make a product with goblins in it. But that's part of the problem with both of these licenses. The ideas of orcs and goblins really should be open source anyways, or the ideas of rolling a D20 should be fairly public domain. Not even open source, it should just be public domain. So I don't know what is particularly that unique to Dungeons and Dragons. Specific names of specific cities and people, sure, I can see that being copyrighted to Dungeons and Dragons. So maybe you can't have a character like Vecna, which I think is a real character from Stranger Things. I think that's a real character from Dungeons and Dragons. Or the Mind Flayer, I think, is a real character from Dungeons and Dragons. So maybe you couldn't have Vecna, maybe you couldn't have Mind Flayer, but maybe you could have a cheap parody version of Vecna and Mind Flayer using the Pathfinder Starfinder license. It immediately gives a lot of cover, though, to people saying, actually, I used this open RPG license to make my additional fan content, um, and thus I am free from being sued, or I'm less likely to have to follow Dungeons and Dragons open gaming license, which it being called open is pretty much a joke at this point. Right, is this a VR game? Yes, it is. At a certain level, I guess what I could do is I could ignore and follow all VR games and then take them off the follow list that way. But that wouldn't make a lot of sense. It would make just so much more sense if I could just make a different list. Blade Walker. I gave this one a chance. It got mixed reviewed. We're doing the follow list cleanup here. I want to hurry up, man. 3-hour long videos. Blade Runner Enhanced Edition, mixed reviewed at 54%. I should probably skip this at this point. There's just no reason to play an enhanced edition of a game that is bad, but I would like to play Blade Runner at some point, the original version of the game, or a better remake of the game. So that is why I'm keeping it on the follow list. I assume this page just failed to load when it opened, yeah, and that it wasn't a case where all of these pictures were just broken. One of the things about Blade Runner, not that I recommend playing the enhanced edition from Night Dive Studios, is that the game randomizes who the bad guy is amongst a selection of bad guys. So every time you play, as I understand it, you get a different experience, or a slightly different experience. Yep, I don't know why these pages didn't load. These would have been the first things to start loading. Blade of Darkness here, I don't think has enough visual polish for me to say yes to it. And it's just a little too low polygon-y. So we'll take that off the follow list. Blade Flash Death came out in 2021, and I just don't think there's enough relevance here. This is a timeline manipulating gameplay, so you move the timeline back and forth, and you can see how the enemies are swinging their blades, and then you position your character and have them swing their blades. So it's like you're scripting out and showing, making almost like a tool assisted speed run of the game. But I don't think there's quite enough polish there to say yes to that, so I'm going to take it from the follow list. We're going through the B's, obviously. Blade Assault is mostly positive, and it came out on January 17th, so I'll just jump ahead and put that on the wish list as a high hack and slash game, high flash and high action. Blade and Ham doesn't have enough reviews to be relevant. I think this may have been one of those beat 'em up games where there was some bikini armor that may have made it a little bit more interesting. This is kind of a great example too of just, here's a Dungeons and Dragons style fantasy game that probably doesn't have any real connection to Dungeons and Dragons, and you just don't really see a lot of desire for these kinds of feudal fantasy games. You have The Witcher that is somewhat in that direction, but it's rare that any of those games are good, and it's just not what people are really looking for. This is just a beat 'em up game, so we can leave the fall list. Let's see, Blacktop Hoops is positive as a basketball game. It's still early access and it requires VR though, so I'll leave that on the fall list. Blackout, The Darkest Night. Let's see, 100% positive but only 10 reviews. Yeah, I guess I'll make an executive decision and put that on the wish list since it is 100% positive. It looks like it's mostly just a point and click type storyline experience. Black Skylands has a anime intro to it, a lot of anime cutscenes, but the actual game seems to be flying around airships, explore the world, gather resources. It's still early access from 2021. I guess I'll give it some more time. And then the last game we have here is called Black Idea, which I guess deserves a little bit more time as a horror game. Although I could certainly see myself just dismissing what these games that kind of look like horror asset flip games even a month or two later, after they've come out, if they just aren't getting any reception compared to what they have. The only English thing here is not even in English, so this feels like this is a horror game that is maybe based off of maybe some Middle Eastern monsters or myths based on the title here. That would be my guess, at least. Alright, well, let me double check my YouTube. Double check my Twitter to see if anything new has come out worth talking about, and then that's going to be it for this stream. Over the weekend, I have a lot of Dicey Dungeon to play. I also probably would like to do another Lego set. I've got a lot of Lego background. Second Dinner, the makers of Marvel Snap, is looking for a machine learning engineer, a data scientist with generative AI, a software engineer, gameplay and features, and a tools engineer, which, looking at those listings, that definitely makes me think that they are going in a very crazy direction, and you can hope that they succeed there, but I would not have a lot of faith there. If you're straight up just trying to make an AI as part of a game, which Second Dinner is a game company, and I have to assume that they aren't pivoting away from being a game company, because if they did that, that would also be crazy. It definitely seems like they are trying to make some kind of ridiculous AI run game, which more than likely is just to get funding and buzzwords in your games. It's just gonna, AI is the new NFTs as far as video games are concerned, and we're gonna start seeing more AI artwork, AI chat GPT things being advertised in games. Another nail in the coffin, certainly, in that the Callisto Protocol is 20% off right now on the Epic Games Store, which, yeah, nobody's talking about the Callisto Protocol in positive ways. I did see that somebody did a collection of the new price pay listings for jobs in California, since California is forcing either IT people or everybody to list the pay range for all jobs. And one of the things it showed is that working for Activision Blizzard paid by far the least. So not only are you being treated terribly and they are union busting, they are paying employees just really, really poorly. Roblox, on the other hand, one of the highest paying things. Now, part of the problem with these job listings, I will say, is that they're giving off fairly wide ranges a lot of times. Obviously, there's one employee that's getting a title and being paid 3 or 4 times less than one employee who is being way overpaid, and that is creating as big of wide of a range as they can possibly make it, to and see that very possibly is a case where they are doing that on purpose to create to create as much, I guess, confusion possible, because they want to advertise jobs as potentially paying a massive amount of money, but then they actually want to pay people a ridiculously low amount of money. And certainly universal basic income, I will preach that as much as I can, would solve a lot of problems, instead of trying to make laws to have companies actually be competitive around what they're actually paying, where companies have this inherent desire and interest to not pay people. Since it is Friday the 13th, I guess there are some cosplayers here showing off costumes or characters, but noticeably the Ghostface killer from Scream, I don't think inherently kills anybody on Friday the 13th. The killers that wore the pig mask in Saw, I don't think ever did anything with Friday the 13th. And inherently the people in Saw are not just trying to kill people for no reason or create horror, so that they're kind of in a different situation here. And then I assume this is supposed to be one of the bunny characters from Bioshock 1, one of the splicers. And splicers don't kill anybody on Friday the 13th. The only person that you would show on Friday the 13th that would make sense would be the main protagonist of Friday the 13th, Jason Voorhees. Not to be confused with Michael Myers of Halloween series, I think I'm getting that right, or Freddy Krueger from the Nightmare on Elm Street, all of which of those characters also are at least one generation older than the characters being shown there. If we want to talk about the real horror of Friday the 13th, my understanding as to why Friday the 13th is memorable is that there was a Knights of the Templar group, Gnostic group of, I think it was Templars / Gnostics, but maybe the Templars were the bad guys. But either way, yeah, I'm fairly certain it was the Gnostics were slaughtered and killed by the Catholic Church on Friday the 13th, which, frankly, wouldn't have been that uncommon during the time. This was hundreds of years ago, and the Catholic Church had a lot of infighting and a lot of people killing each other. But I think that's inherently where the Friday the 13th spookiness comes from. I don't think the number 13 stands for anything else spooky before that, but there probably is something, and Fridays in particular are not spooky. What's funny here is there's a tweet here from YouTube creators going, "Are you introducing any new formats on your channel this year?" Which, honestly, wouldn't it make more sense for YouTube to say, "Hey, we're introducing new formats as options to YouTube," instead of asking content creators, "Are you doing something crazy and new with our system systems that already exist, because there's a limited amount you can do new if YouTube's not adding new content. Yep. Here's a chibi Jason from a deviant artist from the Friday the 13th series. Although, also, the problem with Jason is that his kind of appearance, Jason Voorhees' appearance, I think, changes fairly drastically from movie to movie. So, and don't think he's even in the first movie. Like, honestly, if I was going to make a movie called Friday the 13th, I would probably try and get rid of the idea of a specific killer or character and instead have it something closer to like Final Destination, where there's just this unstoppable force that happens on Friday the 13th that kills people. And yeah, that probably wouldn't work very well either. I don't think Friday the 13th is just as good of a name. Not that names have to be particularly good. The Ring, for instance, as a name of a horror movie, isn't a great name for a movie, but it works, and the story works. I'm scrolling down a lot of my Twitter feed that I probably had already looked at. And yeah, ever increasingly, because I subscribe to, I think, one or two extra cosplayers, I'm seeing a lot more cosplayers on Twitter than anything else compared to video game news. It does definitely feel like maybe 20 to 30% of all game companies are just not putting anything on Twitter at the moment. Whether that's because they have nothing new to say or whether it's because they're boycotting it. It is, I guess, worth pointing out, I don't know how we skipped this, the Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren has backed proletariat's unionization efforts, which is arguably a bad way to phrase that because proletariat, the company, the corporation that they claim are people, is actually anti the unionization efforts. So Elizabeth Warren is backing the unionization effort of the workers at proletariat, not the company proletariat. And your mileage will definitely vary on whether or not you care about any senator or want to support any senator. But in all fairness, senators and government employees, particularly senators, congressmen who make the laws, definitely have a lot more influence and power, and very possibly Elizabeth Warren could do something very easily to support unionization efforts. But then also you run into the catch-22, in which anytime a politician supports anything, their entire history becomes argued, and whether they're a Democrat or Republican becomes argued, so they can often not be as helpful as they really should be. Ideally, congressmen and senators should be like helpful librarians or helpful teachers, if there's a lot of examples of like really great principals and teachers who are making rules, but they're making rules to help everybody and make everything more fair and nicer. Alright, well, that's going to be it for the stream. Thanks to everybody who hopped in on the chat. I guess I do have a duel live I need to do off screen, and I guess that's the only thing I really need to do. I'm not obviously making a lot of progress as far as getting up ranked, and we are somewhat running out of time. We're halfway through the month. We've got still plenty of time to try and get to platinum, but unlikely to make it to diamond. Anyways, that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can free me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.